Hey everybody, welcome to the Growing with Fishes podcast, episode 195. This week we have Roger from I Love Growing Marijuana.
How y'all doing? Glad to be back.
We have the one and only original Mr. Green Jeans Garden.
Thank you so much, Glad. Great to be here.
Not the counterfeit Mr. Green Jeans, the real Green Jeans.
And Marty will be joining us in a bit. We will be next week, hopefully going back to more of a guest focused schedule. But I've just been beyond busy trying to get everything going here. Springtime is always busy time for anyone in the cannabis industry. You know that. So, yeah. I thought we'd go over what everyone's puffing on real quick. I thought everyone would like to know I'm puffing on some Aquaponic chronic sugar from Organic Innovations. Nice. You can find that at your local dispensary in Oklahoma. If they don't have it, ask for it. We have some really nice concentrate, all grown with aquaponically. So make sure you check that out. I'm Steve from Ponics, if you aren't familiar with the show. Thanks for joining us. So it's been a while since we've had you guys on the show. What's new with you, Roger?
Well, first of all, I want to say what I'm puffing on is some Island Diamonds. I'll say thank to my friend out in Oregon for that. It's very nice. It's a bunch of the smaller buds, a whole thing of buds with no stems. How about that? So, and I'll tell you what, it's killer. I've been also, a friend of mine had some, I can't remember the name of it, but it was an Alaskan something the other day, and I couldn't stop smoking, and now I'm out of it already. But yeah, things have been going great. Well, you know, it's not about cannabis, but I always have to mention my wife has just come out of a major surgery. And she's doing well. So all you friends out there that know about that, I'll just say that and move on. Things are going pretty good. We're redoing. I'm finally getting to rebuild and restore my farm this year. I got a great partner who's also a friend of the Regenerative Organic Cannabis Conference that we all went, had last year and had to cancel this year. After Humboldt because of the COVID-19 virus. So sorry we missed all my friends in Michigan, and sorry for you people up in Maine. I know all of you were looking forward to being at the conference and hanging out, and so that's my only vacation of the year. So I'm very sad about that happened, but we had to be safe, and I just think of stories. All I keep thinking about is stories from last year, but the farm's going good. We've decided to hold off on our hemp permit till next year because there's just a little bit too much complications going on in our state. And they're not going to give us any leeway, because of the virus. So deadlines have come up and you can't get things done with government agencies because nobody's answering the phone, or some of them are. Either way, you all have your own issues in your own area, I'm sure. So, it just suffice it to say we're having a lot of issues dealing with even though they're trying with government agencies and doing stuff like that, or we're having a problem with that. So we've decided to bypass that. So we're going to grow food again this year, and we're going to have, we're going to start off, we're going to leave my original greenhouse hydroponic, but we are going to I've already been building hugel beds, and we're going to do some aquaponics grows, and we're definitely going to be practicing natural farming. Other than the hydroponic system, which will be running the rest of my, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of stuff I had before that's in the storeroom. Instead of just throwing it away, we're going to do that. And I know that goes against the concept of what we believe in and how we're growing now, and especially what this show is all about. But we're going to do aquaponics. We're heavy into natural farming. We've got a lot of inputs made. We've been really enjoying that, and I enjoy teaching that to people. I'm not an approved teacher at this point, but I don't think it's really that bad an idea to teach people how to make FPJs and labs and stuff like that. Of course, shout out to Chris Trump. I always tell everybody you might as well buy a bottle of Chris's OHN because it takes about 5 or 6 months to make it. So you might as well buy a bottle of it right up front. And for the price of it, it's excellent considering the breakdown in the ratio you use to water. So we're going to be going with that. I'm not sure we're going to have a terraced garden for vegetables. I'm not sure what we're going to do with the aquaponics yet. I'm not sure. I might do like what I like to do is a test garden where I'll have some different beds that I grow from leafy vegetables to fruiting vegetables. So I get to check out and kind of dial it in and see what's going to be best for us in the future instead of just saying, I'm going to grow this and then maybe it's not successful. I'm going to see what really reacts best in the system that we build. And we're not going to go overboard right off the bat, but I think we're going to do the other side of it. I've really gotten into the hugelkultur beds really have me over just blown away. And I've got so many down trees from hurricanes and so much good dry tree debris on my land that I'll be able to build a bunch of really awesome beds. And so I'm kind of doing that because you can do that by yourself. You don't need much help doing that. And then I got my partner, shout out to Ryan, my partner from James Island, and he's gonna, we've been working together to build our systems and get everything put back together. So basically that's about it. That's about all I'm doing is trying to get back on my feet and become a full-time commercial grower again. And we've been having a great time. Got a couple new clients even after we started and told people we were going to be reopening. I've already got a contract grow going. So I'm real happy about that, and a couple of air markets that we've been asked to bring our produce to once we have it. So I'm real happy in that respect. So yeah, Steve, that's what I'm doing right now. And I probably got some other things I could think of, but not fast enough to keep the show going. So I guess I'll give it back to you and Mr. Green Jeans.
What's up with you, Mr. Green Jeans? It's been a while since you've been on the show. Tell us what you've been up to. I'm sure you got all kinds of cool stuff going on.
I'm so sorry. I guess. I mean, it's not that great. Let's see. I've got my my vape going now. Somebody gave me an riser. It's pretty nice, and I got some Jack Herrera, some flour in it. Nothing real exciting, but yeah, it's the real deal. It's it's an old 20-year-old clone of Jack Herrera, and man, it's really nice. Every time I smoke this, I'm like, holy moly, this is really good. Yeah, just getting ready for the summer season. I guess I'll probably be growing in at least 2 or 3 different people's backyards around here, or maybe 3 or 4 around here in the Los Angeles area, helping people, with their backyard grows and stuff like that. So that's going to be a lot of work. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. I've already been this last couple of weeks, making clones and getting ready, and so it's kind of like I've already got a certain number of clones that have run outdoors already these last couple of years, and which we know are good. But then also, you want to trial other new ones too, and we're a little bit farther south. It's like me and Steve were talking before the show, and you're much further north there in Oklahoma is much better, is more central sort of, drug cannabis range, more for the latitude, I would say, far from where we are here is getting pretty far south, and we don't have a very long day in the summer. And some plants, I have some really wonderful plants. I have this one, plant that such a nice plant. She has a name, Chill Jill. She's like related to Jack Herrera. She's like a 50% Jack Herrera F2 down from that cross with my white wizard. And such a nice plant that she has her own name and everything. And I've tried growing her a couple times outside here in Los Angeles, and it's no go. Even if you set her outside in the middle of the summer on June 21st, on the longest day, she's pretty much going to start flowering. Because I think our day length might be longest day is only 14 and change. I don't even think we got 15 hours.
So I was wrong. We actually beforehand we're at 34 degrees.
Oh yeah, you're pretty close to me. I thought that. I didn't think you were that much further north.
Yeah, I don't know why before it was coming up different, but you're at 30. You're at 34.05.
Okay.
And we are at. I must have put in the wrong city.
And we're not far from.
I'm at 33. I'm at 33.9.
And I'm on that same line too. Even in South Carolina, we're right almost straight across from Southern Cal. So
yeah, well, this is getting really pretty far south as far as the drug cannabis. Traditionally grown usually a bit north in most parts of the world, I think. So I mean, we're already kind of pushing the southern limit a little bit. I definitely have noticed some plants don't like it that much. So I'm also, you know, trying to mess with. I think that's one of the reasons why I like the Feijoa Kush. Who've done it outside a couple of these times last couple of years too. That it's done really well here. You know, even though it's pretty far south and pretty you know, Mediterranean here, and it's more of a definitely more of an indica dominant, a real Kush type, which I would think of as more of a northern strain. But anyway, yeah, um, getting ready for summer is going to be really exciting. Making a lot of this. I last year I did a lot of plants that I used absolutely no food just to make a point. Like I grew that one plant. I think I did a let's see, it was the SLB, so that was a cross. That was a super lemon haze and cherry bomb plant, and I think I did around 11 and a half ounces or 12 ounces in a 2 gallon container. So, so it was in 2 gallons of dirt in the backyard in the container, and I didn't feed it at all. It was only with whatever food went into the container to start with. And I would say about 50% of that container soil, maybe, no, maybe more closer to 33% of it was just basically yard soil, or, you know, not definitely not compost, but, you know, backyard dirt with a fair amount of clay in it and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. You know, just kind of to make a point about how, you know, you don't really need a lot of fertilizers and things like that. Like how easy it is to grow a cannabis plant in your backyard if you just concentrate on good watering. You know, repot it a few times. It's really all you need to do. Um, so, yeah, I mean, that was like what it was. 12 ounces would be 3/4 of a pound, right? Something like that. So I think it was 11 and change. So it was close to 3/4 of a pound, and out of 2 gallons.
Not bad out of a 2 gallon pot.
Out
That's
of a
for
two
sure.
gallon pot, right, right. And you know, with no fertilizer at all, just with water, you know, just with whatever
Wow.
was in the dirt, in the soil. No added fertilizer. Although the soil, you know, was okay. And I'm really into bone meal lately. I don't know. Maybe you guys can talk me out of that, but bone meal is a good, because phosphorus, cannabis plants are really hungry for phosphorus. You know what I mean? And I think, yeah, bone meal seems to be a really good source of it. And I noticed they seem to eat a lot of it. That's one of the really good things about recycling your potting soil. If you
Yep.
recycle potting soil a lot, because I think the bone meal doesn't even become the nitrogen of the bone meal. You know, I'm sure there's all different things in it and stuff, but the nitrogen from it, I think, becomes available pretty quick. But maybe the phosphorus not for a couple of months. You know, maybe it really doesn't get going for a couple of months. So that's another good reason to recycle your potting soils. Get the full benefit of your phosphorus.
Yeah,
But
Doug, I still tell people, sorry, I'm
no,
sorry.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Thank you.
I still tell people that beginners, and people that are starting out, when a push comes to shove, instead of just digging just dirt itself, and there's nothing wrong with your good dirt if it's good dirt, if you have it soil tested, but there's still nothing wrong with making soil with your bone meal, blood meal type kind of situation. Your
Yeah,
your magnesium sulfate, which is Epsom salts for you people that don't know that, and
yeah,
whatever. There's other things to add, but yeah, I still don't think you can, if you're going to do a soil grow, and you're just beginning, especially if you're going to do beds, it's a
yeah,
lot easier than, there's a lot of amendments that cost a lot more. Let's put it this way. You can
yeah,
buy dolomitic lime, you can buy Epsom salts, you can buy blood meal and bone meal all together for about $30 or $40
yeah,
for all of it.
yeah.
So,
You know that
and that's a
that makes
50-pound bag of dolomitic lime, or
right.
25 to 30-pound bag. Or I yield. I yield.
No, I'm just saying that makes me think of that, you know, again, and because I was really concentrating what I was saying before, you know, the cannabis plants really use a lot of water. And if you can really focus on giving them that water that they need, that can go a really long ways. And, you know, that's like that, you know, all those kind of nutrients and everything like that. It's basically they're there and available, but a lot of it has to do with the watering, your watering style, and how much does that potting mixture that, you know, match your watering style. So people do need fairly good drainage, especially if you're going to put in a container. And generally that you think of in container growing, you don't want to have soil from your backyard. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about, Mr. Green Jeans? And right, no, exactly. And probably if you don't live in San Juan Capistrano, or in San Clemente, because our soil there is mostly sandy, and a little bit of clay there is actually a precious thing. Whereas a lot of people live in areas where their soil is plenty of clay, and but still, I think a little tiny bit of it. And then if you adjust your watering style, your watering skills to be able to deal with that, because clay helps to hold, it's another thing that helps to hold moisture. And if it's kind of pretty well distributed, just a small amount through the potting soil, and if you're watering well, you've got good watering skills, that can almost help it to hold a little water. It'll drain a little bit slower. It will drain a little bit slower, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Cannabis really likes it. It's got pretty tough roots anyway. It likes to tough it through a little bit of clay there.
Not only that, clay has a bunch of minerals in it that you can.
Clay is wicked good.
Yeah, it's really right mixture of clay is excellent in
nutrient.
In that
and there's somebody
or
listening
or
to this
anything.
podcast in Illinois. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about, Mr. Green Jeans? You're out of your mind. And yeah, I know, I hear you. I know, but let me tell you, in San Clemente, clay is a precious. In Los Angeles, clay is a precious commodity. It's so precious that I add it to my potting soil.
Neat.
Even to the trees, you know what I mean? I mean, anything gets a little bit of clay. Helps to get from drying out on our really hot days when we get a lot of air movement and everything like that. The clay can help hold moisture in the soil, so. But anyways, I'm rambling on. But yeah, I'm really excited. It's a great summer's coming up. Hey, Marty, what's happening?
Yeah, I want to say, hey, Marty, too. Here we go.
What's up, guys? Glad to see you guys on.
Yeah, we are glad to be here. It's been a tough few weeks. So sorry I've missed you guys.
Yeah, we missed you too. Same with you, Mr. Green Jeans. Thanks for everything.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I want to build a shack in your backyard and come live in your backyard, Marty.
Yeah.
You keep putting them pictures, I'm going to show up one day.
You can show up. I'm not going to say you can move in, but you can show up.
I love it. You got to move. I feel so good for you after what you went through. I just to open this up that you found such a beautiful. I mean, oh my God, it's like we all live in God's country, but that's God's country right there. I'll tell you what, I could just stand there and stare down over the mountains all day long, and some of them.
I do.
That you got, yeah, I know.
Sometimes it's not good. You're like, man, I should get up and do something, but oh shit, it's so nice right here. I think I'll twist up another one. I think I'll take another dab. So it's good and it's not. But then again, it also helps me with not over gardening, right, Mr. Green Jean? See, the more sitting on the porch I do, the better my plants are, probably.
Probably, yeah.
Well, or you could plant other plants. You don't have to fuck with the plants that you got.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're doing now. It's like replacing a lot of the decorative ones with ones that produce food.
Excellent.
So last week we covered kind of newer or springtime grower topics. What advice do you have, Roger and Mr. Green Jeans, on what people should be doing in springtime, and maybe advice for newer people looking to either get growing or maybe even start breeding for the first time?
Well, I'll just take a quick thing and then I'll pass it to Mr. Green Jeans. I think some of the most important thing for people starting gardens and growing is always, this is because I teach people now a little bit around here locally. I find that what they need to know is they need to know that you need to do your water tests and you need to do a soil test to know what you got in your water and what you got in your soil, so that you can have an educated idea about what you want to do to amend it, or what kind of fertilizer or whatever system you might want to do. Now, we lean towards, not tend to, but we lean towards an organic philosophy in a way that we're not hurting the soil. So we don't want to add salts and stuff like that generally. It's not saying you can't ever do it, but we prefer that. And we've found that there's results out there that you don't have to In fact, your garden's going to be your farm or garden's going to be way better not using salts in the long run if you're willing to learn and do what you need to learn and with natural farming or aquaponics and such like that. I think other than that, everybody needs to understand that pH is one of the most important factors in growing something successfully. And what people bypass all the time, they tend not to check or they don't buy the proper meters. I think that's the two most important things I know. Get your water and soil tested so that you have an educated way of building your garden, and then make sure you have the proper testing equipment in order to make sure that your soil or your solution is properly pH'd.
Absolutely. I was listening to a. Go ahead, Mr. Green.
No, I was just gonna say, I think you hit most of it. I wouldn't.
I got one more.
Okay, go.
If you're going to grow outdoors, you need to learn because I learned from years to years, you need to learn when you start your seeds. Because if you put them out too early, a late frost will kill three-quarters of your, because I had 250 poblano plants planted one year. In the last week of April, it got into 28 degrees and killed 200 to 175 out of 250. I was thinking, I'm going to really make a killing all of a sudden because I saw
exactly what I was going to say. With cannabis, people all over the country and much further north than us too. When we just now figured out that we're all three of us here, except for Marty, of course, all across this southern sort of band. But don't be afraid to plant late. Actually, late is really great. I mean, I've grown quite a bit in New York State, in Connecticut, in Massachusetts, and late is always better. There's a lot of things that grow better late too. This is a general thing across the garden, across the board in gardening. It's always better to start your cucumbers and melons late in Massachusetts too, because it's just too fucking cold. Pardon my language. It's just too cold early. And no, it's true. I mean,
no, it's just that you didn't want to cut.
No, we don't need it. We don't need that. I know. Shut up, Mr. Green. But no, it's true that that just do better later on. Squash is like that too. If you plant it too early, you'll probably get a powdery mildew and everything. It's too cold, and it won't really get a plant. The same, squash, the same variety planted a couple of weeks later is going to overtake a plant that you planted earlier.
Yeah.
That you planted 3 weeks earlier. It's literally going to go overtake it, grow bigger, and end up with a much bigger vine. And you're going to get a much bigger yield. Well, cannabis is very like that too. And another really important factor of that, really glad you brought this up, Roger, because that was exactly when I was listening to you talking, I was thinking, I should say something about planting late. But then I totally forgot by the time you got in because I was like, yeah, he said it all.
I agree, though. I like it. Yeah.
But that's a really important thing because there's another thing is with the day length too. I believe, and this I may be getting into a little bit of speculative area, but I do really think that people who live further north will get a faster flowering result if the plant doesn't see too many increasing day lengths. In other words, if from the very time that it goes into the ground, if it's as close to June 21st as possible,
right,
and it only sees decreasing days from the very moment it goes in the ground, I believe most plants will actually finish earlier. So people that live really far north, I think can entice their plants to literally finish quicker and get more done before the frost happens if they plant later.
And that's what I was thinking of when you brought that late starting up is what I was thinking in my brain. We need to talk about the photo period because you're starting late. It gives you, you go from long days straight to shorter days once you
exactly
to the summer solstice. So you mentioned what, I was thinking too.
Yep. Yeah, and I think some plants when they see the day increasing, they think they are going to be fooled into thinking they have a much longer growing season than they really do. Whereas if they come out of the ground and they spend their entire life seeing days only, staying even or getting shorter, they're much more likely to be convinced that they got to get their shit done, kind of, and they're going to go through and finish their flowering cycle quicker. And I'm saying this is not across the board with any cannabis. It's going to be definitely genetics again is going to play a big role.
And geographical location.
Yeah. How quick your day length is changing. But for sure, a lot of people up north and everywhere, don't be afraid to plant late. Still plenty of time. And
I
watering.
mean, I planted really late. I planted like towards the end of July late and still pulled like a pound of plant outside.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know,
You're going to grow food. You're always going to have food. You know, you're going to have, you may not get to grow it to maturity where you get all the yield you could have, especially like say out of indeterminate tomato, or if we're talking cannabis, we're talking kind of everything right now, but
Mhm,
an
mhm.
indeterminate tomato, you can still have a bunch of pounds and pounds of tomatoes, even though your cold air you comes in and puts and squashes it, unless you can keep that vine,
Yes.
you know. And for those of you who don't know what indeterminate or determinate tomato, determinate tomatoes, what you'd see on a tomato farm, where they plant in the South, where they plant it or, you know, after the frost, and then they grow it till like June, and they harvest everything, and all the tomatoes are gone. That's all the. And then
Finished
an
all at the same time.
indeterminate tomato will grow in a vine 30 to 40 yards long, and you actually have to lean and lower it if you grow vertically, like we hang ours up. So
it's
they're
kind of
going
like an
up.
auto flower.
Huh?
It's kind of determined. It's kind of like an auto flower, and then it kind of has like a set genetic clock. It's only going to grow to so many
Yep.
days tall. in the
Yeah,
same-
that's similar. Yeah, that's actually, I've never heard anybody say that, but I can't argue with that. But the indeterminate, you can actually grow, if you can keep it alive in a greenhouse, although the yield will still fade as it gets older and older, you could grow a tomato plant for 2 years or so.
Yeah.
One tomato
It's like
plant.
it's
Keep
like
leaning
ever
and
bearing strawberries versus June bearing
Yeah.
strawberries. you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
So
Yeah.
growing's fun, and you can just keep growing food, and you never have anything to lose. At least you'll find out if it
And
grows.
further south where we are here, down here, you can grow at least two. You can at least do 2 waves of. You can also set plants out later in the fall. You may have to veg them up to a certain size indoors under lights, but that's actually pretty successful. Going for that second wave, or even, you know, I stick them outside all throughout the winter and just leave them in their containers, in their little quart containers when my closet gets too full.
Are you talking about cannabis in it?
Cannabis. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry.
No, I
sorry.
just want to make sure because
Drifted back to cannabis there. Yeah, sorry.
no, we're in
Thank
and
you
out.
for
It's
clarifying that, Roger.
fine.
Same. Close enough.
So you'll get some really pretty colors if you do that too.
Exactly. Oh, that's exactly why I stick them outside. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
color for sure.
Hey, I'm
Exactly
here
the
to help.
reason. Yeah. Colors are always good. Love my colors. And
I
yeah,
think Marty wanted to get a word in edgewise too.
yeah, sorry, Marty. And there's his word. Yeah, no,
Too late, I'm having.
We're just
He has
having a
much
good
better-
time show tonight. That's good.
here's a much better climate for the colors. We often don't even get the cool nights, evenings down here in Southern California. So we don't.
Yeah, it's pretty good here for that. I mean, obviously, you know, we have other issues we have to deal with, like
Yeah.
you know, mold,
Yeah, yep.
Earthquakes.
you know, rainy season. Not too many earthquakes here.
Oh, you had to bring up mold. I saw a video on YouTube the other day where a guy was describing mycelium as mold. You know, he was going, yeah, you got to do this and put this stuff in there so you get the mold and everything. And I'm like,
Yeah,
it's not, it's mycelium you're trying to create. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I-
technically,
I mean,
technically they're
Sorry.
Well, what are you saying? They're technically the same, Steve?
oh, they're all the same family, even if they're using the wrong terminology.
It's all fungus.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
mold
yeah,
isn't really, the mold's not good for your plants. So.
What
Well,
is
it
it like?
depends. It depends on what the mold is, you know.
Okay. All right. So we opened up a
We-
new
We had
conversation.
a question from chat. It says, "Hey Steve, I had 3 plants in a 3x3. One had 10 to 20 seeds. Do you know why?"
Herm.
Yeah, it sounds like that one plant hermaphrodited and
That Bruce Jenner strain.
self-pollinated. Yeah,
The Bruce Jenner strain.
yeah, the Bruce Jenner strain. Balls in the
Oh,
bottom.
Lord have mercy. I'm not, yeah.
Okay, Roger.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. Just thinking about that is so heartbreaking.
Hey, why are you the one thinking about it?
It's about the fact that we have an Olympic hero, you know, that's just,
Sounds like you really looked up to him.
well, at one point we did look up to him, but you know, not anymore and never have.
He's still pretty tall.
Never been in the same room with the guy.
So So again, so that one plant was stressed out either through light stress or through, I would look and see, maybe was it the one closest to your fan? Was it the one closest to your power strip or your light controller or some other source of light or wind or stress?
Yeah, roll a joint and go into your room when the lights are off and smoke it. And when you're done smoking it, see if you can see any light in the room at all whatsoever, and then look relatively close to that. And I would say that's probably where you're going to find it, unless it was due to some other stress. But generally, if it's just one like that, it's an environmental issue, usually due to light leaks. And let your eyes adjust. That's why I say take some time in there. You know, you got to be in there for 10 or 15 minutes and be able to really see it. So and that usually a genetic herm you would see like across the board, like you'd have seen all kinds of them, and you probably won't be able to really tell where it came from this time, because it the flowers have already pollinated and fell off, and you might find them on the floor in a pot or something like that, but
Yeah.
it's going to be really tough to pin down where it was. But definitely look for the light leaks and try to patch those up and hope you don't get it next time.
Yep. Well, you were saying that, I was thinking too, because we hadn't talked about this. You were talking about possibly light leaks or breeze. Well, we could also say that perhaps you underwatered it at some point, or maybe, I'm not sure about overwatering.
All kinds of
Well, it
stresses.
depends. It could be
stress reaction.
but
Yeah,
usually, some stress. It could be temperature, it could be pH, it could be nutrients, it could be light.
Yeah.
Pest, it could be pest
nitrogen.
pressure. Yeah.
But
So always check your
favorite.
pH first is what my point is. That's another point. Is like,
usually when your pH is that far off, though, you'll get other symptoms. You
Right.
get leaves twist, or you'll get discoloring, or you'll get something else to go with it. So generally, when you see just one little tiny herm in one little area and you don't have any other symptoms, that's why I usually jump to light leaks over.
Yeah.
But you're right, absolutely right. It is a stress reaction.
All
So it
kinds of
could be to
stresses.
any stress.
Yeah.
And usually it has to carry the genetic trait for it already,
Yes.
right? So
Definitely.
those are really the kind of different doorways you got to go through to get a herm. So your genetics already have the ability to herm. They already carry the trait to herm when stressed, and you
Pretty
introduce
much the
some
number
stress.
one issue, I'd say. That
Yeah.
genetics is to
And-
first thing to blame, really.
And there's genetic tests now. If you want to really get into this and you're doing breeding on your own, or maybe you're a breeder for a company, you can get a qPCR. We had Kevin McKernan. What was his company's name? Does anyone remember?
oh,
No.
many brain cells have burned since then.
Medicalgenomics.com.
Okay.
Medicinal genomics. I'm sorry, medicinal genomics. Kevin McKernan, great guy, awesome Twitter and Instagram account. If you don't follow him, if you're trying to stay on top of the latest in genetics and genetic markers and stuff, but his company has a genetic marker product called a qPCR. You can actually get that, and they actually have test sets that you can buy for finding out what the percentage is that your particular genetics has to hermaphrodite, right? So you can figure out if that gene's being expressed more or less, or and figure out what's your likelihood of hermaphroditic traits with your particular type of genome using some of the stuff that they've developed.
Oh, that's cool. So then you could admit that particular strain from your breeding process.
Correct. Or you could just back cross that with something until you found prodigy that was acceptable.
Cool.
Because sometimes you need to. We were talking with this, I forget who it was, one of the guests. It was a brilliant point, and it's like, sometimes, man, you need to breed with a hermaphrodite. It's what you got. You need, that's and it's got the great traits, and that's what you're trying to get. And unfortunately, they're all just hermaphrodites or whatever. So you've got to deal with it. That. It's a real pain in the ass. I did that with some stuff from Mekong. I remember we called it the Mekong Gold, and man, the first couple of generations, I mean, I had to cross it. There was no way. I had to outcross it, There was no, at first I was thinking, yeah, I'll just breed it. I'll keep it as a land race, but oh my God. And, you know, I've learned some things since then. People have pointed out, Steve pointed out to me that my trying to force it into short cycles was probably pissing it off too. That it
Yep.
probably would have enjoyed just vegging for a good 3/4 of a year anyways before being asked to flower. But,
Yeah,
you
like a
know,
typical sativa, right?
yeah, extreme sativa. Yeah,
Yeah,
this from
yeah.
from Laos or whatever, Laotian stuff.
I
And yeah,
had one of those once, and it went away.
yeah, it's just wild. I mean, really hard to deal with. And it's like every single plant is a fence straddler. But then on the other hand, there's wonderful traits. You can tell the beautiful smells and everything there. And so you know, it's like you want to try and figure out a way to deal with it. You know, you cross it and you try to keep those things that you like, and you try to breed out that hermaphroditism. It's possible. You know?
So we had a thing that says, so just certain parts of the plant hermaphrodite, not necessarily the whole plant. So you can
Yeah,
have part of the plant hermaphrodite, not the whole thing. You can have the whole plant hermaphrodite. It depends on the stressor, right? So let's talk about this, right? So why does a plant hermaphrodite? Does anyone here, and okay, does anyone here who hasn't taken my class or doesn't teach the class, which excludes the entire panel, know why plants hermaphrodite in the first place? It's a self-preservation mechanism. Okay, if it's a lonely female plant and she doesn't get pollinated, she wants to ensure that she has a whole bunch of daughters next year that might get pollinated by a male, or that might get pollinated somehow by the wind or a bee or whatever. You know, a beetle, a bat, who knows what the local pollinator is. But that's, and I apologize for the beeping in the back. I will fix that.
It sounds like a
But-
Facebook alert.
Hermaphroditism is good. A lot of things would like to be hermaphrodite.
Exactly. So if you're
That's a
looking
pain
at
in the ass.
from a self-preservation mechanism
Like Bruce.
standpoint, this is a wonderful mechanism, but for people trying to make pure sensimelia, this is a very annoying mechanism. So that's the reason why the plants make female pollen, so that their next generation will be all female, so that it has most likely chance to locally continue and prevent local extinction.
Yeah.
Now, any extreme stress, be it nutrient, temperature, pH, wind, any kind of grow condition that's extremely outside of its normal range can induce hermaphroditic traits. It could also be excessive light at night, which is also one of the most common ways to induce hermaphroditic traits accidentally.
Yeah.
Especially in a home grow, like in just a, like I think it's probably happened to like most people when you first get started. You try to just grow a photo plant in your living room or something.
Yeah.
You learn about photo periods, like
Yeah.
it happens.
I think I have a theory that it's also related to, sorry to jump in, it's also that one of the things is root growth, because I've noticed that also people that grow in beds as opposed to regular containers, each single plant in a container, that sometimes that growing in large beds is they're more likely to get hermaphrodites. It's true. And I don't know, I just feel like sometimes if it's possible for the roots to grow, or for some reason they're still being enticed to grow, whether it's because there's nutrients available or for whatever reason. And I think something like a light leak can do exactly that, so there's light there and it's causing the roots to grow. That's why I feel like, anyway, I'm totally shooting in the dark here, but I feel like someday we may tie a lot of these kinds of stressors together and realize possibly that's it. It's something that suddenly triggers root growth, and then the plant goes, oh, my roots are growing, why don't I pop out a few flowers? You know what I mean?
Yeah, good.
Right.
Just like,
Or even like a 2-stage trigger, like I haven't
Yeah.
been pollinated and I still am capable of root growth. So
yes, right.
Let's
Oh,
go.
yeah. Oh, wow. Great point, Marty. Great point.
Yeah, well, that's what Steve said in the first place. So basically,
Yeah, because
that
it's a survival
self-preservation.
mechanism.
Yeah, that's
it's
how
a
they keep
thing.
growing. While you find them in the forest when you go out.
Yeah.
and I think also it could explain why you see it in only some genetic strains. So like some of them, like obviously have adapted to different photo periods, but some of them just might be outside of what we normally grow them. You know, so we don't see them as often. I know a lot of people around here that, you know, because they have, you know, kind of tight knit growing circles, you just start getting the habit of doing certain things. Like almost nobody around here will run Jaeger indoors just because it has a reputation of herming out running it indoors. But almost everybody runs it outdoors because for whatever reason, it doesn't, you know, it just doesn't deal well with light change. I think that even if you do like what the normal people do of changing it every hour and reducing it down to gradually change it is way more progressive than what happens outside. So their sensitivity to it, like you might be able to grow Jaeger indoors if you're willing to spend your, you know, 3 weeks changing your light to go down
Gradually.
You know, like, gradually at a time. But nobody is, so it just doesn't happen, and it just gets written off as, oh, it just herms.
I do.
You know, where they're just all these different strains just have different thresholds, and we just happen to bump into some of them.
Yes.
I think is
You know,
definitely a possibility.
So on that note, let's talk about ways to mitigate hermaphroditic traits. So if you do have a strain that has hermaphroditic traits, I would say the number one thing you could do off the bat, first off, is don't give it any kind of extreme conditions, temperature, pH, or otherwise. But two, give it silica. Again, ensure that your pH up regimen is potassium silicate and calcium carbonate. The silica, again, there's countless studies with row crops showing how silica improves numerous in reducing numerous stress hormone plant hormones. Exactly. So reducing heat stress, reducing water stress, reducing a whole wide range of stressors in a whole, you know, wheat, corn, beans, a whole wide range. And this is heavily documented both genomically and in tissue samples and a whole bunch of other stuff. So again, making sure silica is part of your program when doing aquaponics will help reduce bolting and lettuce, everything from bolting and lettuce to herming and cannabis. And this is why, again, why it's kind of goofy to me that some of the old school regimens with potassium hydroxide and stuff are kind of goofy to me when you can have potassium silicate, which will give you all these immense IPM benefits and reducing hermaphroditic traits, reducing all types of heat stress related problems like bolting and lettuce and numerous other problems you have in aquaponics. Why this hasn't been looked at sooner, but before we started doing research at it back in the day when I was back at Aquaponics Source. So this is a really good way that we can, even lettuce growers can utilize silica to help reduce some of these flowering traits in their own plants, but particularly even in cannabis, reducing chances for hermaphroditic traits because you're just reducing those stress hormone production in general that leads to that hormone hermaphroditic trait to begin with.
And it goes back to when you do that proper nutrition for any plant or human being, you're going to be stronger and more resistant to pest and disease. Yes. So it's kind of all along that same line of thinking about doing it right and getting the right, your grow methods correctly. I wanted to jump back real quick and say one last thing about what Mr. Green Jeans was saying when he was talking about hermaphrodites. And I think we kind of touched on it, but it wasn't said just like this way. Like you touched on it with your land race you were talking about, is that it could be insufficient breeding. Is why part of the question was, why are we getting hermaphrodites? And the one thing that wasn't really said, I mean, we danced around it all through the conversation, but on that particular question, we didn't really. So I wanted to ask you, Mr. Green Jeans, if you believe, because it's you breed more than any of us here, so what do you think about the idea that I think it, a lot of it, the reason you get hermaphrodites is because of poor breeding practices or insufficient breeding to some extent, not across the board, but
absolutely. A lot of feminized seeds have been made, and thankfully, I think the process is. I mean, I think it's going away. I think it's not as popular as it was, but 20 years ago to 10 years ago, there were a lot of them were sold commercially, so people just had a plant that spontaneously became a hermaphrodite and they're like, oh, awesome, well, let's make feminized seeds. And the thing of that is that it absolutely ups the chances of it's going to start actually immediately, probably with most times you do that. Well, it depends on how much stress, and was causing him. So plants go all, okay, put it this way. Plants go all the way from being spontaneous hermaphrodites, literally on fence straddling, lady boys. These were from Laos. Pardon me, anybody out there? And but they go all the way to plants which literally almost cannot be convinced to make a a male flower. A plant that is so female that even the silver nitrate and stuff like that has. I've heard of ones. I think I might have a few but I haven't really tried. I've feminized some plants, but I've got a whole bunch of them. I got a couple that I suspect would almost completely resist being feminized. So plants go all the way from their hermaphroditism, their male and femaleness is a continuum, which goes all the way from total fence straddling hermaphrodite to extreme female for sure, and I presume extreme males. And I think the best ones, for the most part, for us for breeding are these really, really good males and females. Sometimes you do have to breed because those are the traits you want. This is why I was talking about before,
Yeah,
you've got this wonderful, and it's only available, those traits are only available from this land race, which has a pretty good percentage of hermaphrodites. I do think you can get rid of them in a few generations, with good breeding. Of course, absolutely.
Especially with the Southeast Asian
Absolutely
strains,
get rid
they're
of them.
really prone to hermaphroditic traits.
yeah. Guess who just popped in from Idaho?
Hey, who's this that just joined us?
Does he have a beard or not? I can't see very good.
Hey guys,
Yeah.
He's debating. I heard
How's
he's
it going?
Hey,
Going
Chris,
good.
what's up?
chilling. It's a beautiful day in Idaho.
So
It
tell
looks
us what you're up to and what you've been up to and what you got coming up, because you're doing all kinds of cool stuff lately.
Yeah, I've been. I took my family out to a client's place. They're intensive cattlemen, so they're grass farmers basically. They really cool farm, organic farm. Been in the family for 3 generations, and they raise cattle for meat, and they do a lot with their grass intensive grazing. It's really cool, and so we're going to get them a baseline with soil samples, and they want to kind of bring in, they don't have much in the way of fungal life, so they want to boost that grass production so that they can get more heads of cattle per acre and make more money. Yeah. And then there's it's Idaho's funny is, another client I'm out with is they're alfalfa farmers. They're gonna be really cool people, ropers, and work with cattle, but they want to grow alfalfa. They can make a good amount of money on their 100 acres and just growing alfalfa. So their land's kind of pretty depleted. They've only been there for 10 months or so, and they haven't started farming it yet. And so we're working with them. So I'm out hanging with the beautiful country folk out in Idaho, and it's been fun. Totally cool.
Awesome.
Thanks
So
for having me on, Steve.
Yeah, I understand you're doing some cool stuff. I think tomorrow you're unveiling some new KNF stuff.
Yeah, it's not really new. I haven't put a video on it, so people ask a lot of questions. Tina at Lala Grows on Instagram, we're going to talk, and I'm going to show how to make water soluble potassium. And Steve and I were talking about it yesterday, and it's just using what you have to make a really great kind of uptake or really available potassium for your plants.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
We'll do that.
Will you be
tomorrow
doing
at
a
noon.
will you be doing a YouTube video on that as well later on, or will
I
that be up
probably
on her
should.
video? Or
I probably should. I've stopped telling people I'm going to do YouTubes because something in me I've just not been producing much lately. So, but yeah, it's on her Instagram tomorrow at noon, I think, and she'll probably keep it up for a bit. But I could tell you how to do it right now. But
sure,
yeah, and
that'd
then
be awesome.
I was going to ask you what are you
Yeah,
using? You know, yeah.
I wasn't sure if you wanted to spill the beans, but if you were willing to, that'd be amazing.
Come on.
oh yeah,
man.
totally. Yeah, I'm cruising right now. We're in a new property, me and my family. So we just claimed some ground. We're starting a garden. So we just got this going with IMO and a few plants. It's really early for putting plants in the ground in Idaho right now.
Yeah.
So, but there's a melon, and we got tomatoes and strawberries gone in. And the thing I'm most excited about in my garden this year are kaleettes. That is my my new exciting crop. So it's a cross between kale and Brussels sprouts, and so it looks kind of like the little ball they play with in Harry Potter, Quibble or whatever.
Quidditch?
It's like Quidditch. Thank you.
I'm not sure. I mean, I just think that's what it is. Yeah.
I think you're right. I definitely wasn't right. But yeah, it's like this ball, and then it's got little like kale looking things coming off of it. Cook it with some trout or something. Pretty excited about that. But yeah, potassium, water soluble potassium. Traditionally in Korea, they'll use sesame stalks, which is actually what I'm going to show tomorrow, because I have some. But typically here in the US, people aren't growing a whole lot of sesame. So
Wow. I could have ordered some the other day, and I wish I'd seen this last week.
but we have some great things that grow readily here. Sunflower stalks and heads are really high in potassium, and so is asparagus. You know, if you're growing asparagus, you let some of them go to flower and go to you know, for vegetative growth, you let some of them go. You don't harvest all of it, and you can whack those big full bodies and use those too. So a lot of people have access to sunflowers or could grow them easily. They grow like crazy. But what you do is you take it, and you can use the wet material or the dry material, and you biochar it. So I'm going to show tomorrow, I'm going to show it in a little Dutch oven over a fire. You just throw it in a Dutch oven, get it going, and that material, when finished, it's like a, you know, fully finished, like a crinkly biochar. And then you just take that and soak it, you know, put it in kind of a tea bag, some sort of cloth or mesh bag, and soak it in water, 1 part biochar to 10 parts water, for 7 to 10 days.
Wow.
And then you pull it out, and that will be just a micronized potassium. The water is enough to yank on that and put it into solution.
That's pretty awesome, Chris. That's just, I like it. I think everybody just understood and know how to do that now.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot to it. It's, you know, if you understood that, you got it. You don't need a demonstration.
Well, how much more simple? If you want calcium, you get some eggshells and you barbecue the freaking membranes off the inside and crunch them up. And what, isn't that you put them in alcohol, right? Is that
those you put in vinegar?
Vinegar. Okay.
Yeah,
I knew that. Okay.
Calcium acetate is what you end up with.
I love that stuff, man. I'm so into natural farming with all this, because I got in where I live in the swamp, we got such great, I got all kind of plants. My partner keeps coming out. He's going on a canoe trip with a botanist tomorrow, but he keeps coming out going, that's that certain weed. That'd be great for FPJ. That'd be great. You know, I got dandelions everywhere. I got horsetail. I got everything, you know. That's nice. I had a question for you, unless you got something to go on with what you're showing us.
No, I'm just here to chat, man. I'm hanging out.
Well, I wanted to ask you something just because I saw it on the other day on, I think it showed up on Facebook. Probably was a YouTube video though that was on Facebook, and it showed where you said, "Well, here, I just wanted to ask you for all the people out there." You said, "Well, here, yesterday this was grass and weeds, and today, bam, we're down to dirt." What was your method for removing all your grass and weeds that cleanly in one day?
So yeah, with natural farming, we're usually not crazy into tilling
Right.
of any kind, because once you take all the time to establish all that fungal life and all your worms and all the other stuff that gets going on, you don't want to disturb it too much. But in a new area, do it. So we're here in a new place, haven't farmed here before, and so I brought this beast of a 100-year-old rototiller out that a couple friends of mine put back together that was in pieces, and it was a bear, man. I was welding on it. I was run into the automotive store to fix a fuel leak and all that good stuff. But we got this area tilled up. So yeah, this whole area was just solid grass and weeds and a funky not productive tree in the middle. And then we applied IMO. I went to one of my neighbors and got horse manure and brought that in before I tilled it. Some ash we got a wood burning stove all winter, so potash, and and IMO 3, and because that's what I had, and we tilled that all in with all the weeds and stuff, and now we'll still have to weed a little bit, but to try and farm in something that was, this is basically what it would have looked like if I hadn't tilled. It is just over the fence here. To try and farm in that, out the gate is just, impossible. You're working so hard just to get plants to have access to the sun. So yeah, I recommend if you're working with new territory, one time doing some sort of tilling just so you can get on top of it. And then you can bring in your microbes. Yes, you are disturbing stuff, but the benefit of being able to farm where it's not totally, knee-high grass is worth it.
How deep would you say the till was? Because that would have something to do with your structure underneath too.
Yeah, probably 4 inches.
So that's not that bad. That's not disturbing.
Yeah, 4 to 6. Yeah,
You got all the roots.
You don't need to go. Yeah, get all the roots. Exactly. All you're trying to do is disturb down so the grasses that are getting turned in. Basically, you're composting in place with those grasses, but yeah, it's just to get them kind of wrecked enough that you're not dealing with kind of full-grown root structures.
Now, a question I had, since you said you brought in horse manure, I'm assuming, well, I'm hoping, or I have another question, that horse manure was composted horse manure, right?
Yeah, this is 3 years old.
Fresh. Okay, right. Okay, yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But I'm not, if you have IMO, I'm not super opposed to a little fresh, just because you're going to get so much activity out of it. But then you got to be real careful that the ratio is not too high to your total area, because you'll be hot, as far as hot's not temperature, but hot in that you'll be burning roots and things won't be growing.
All right, thanks. I wanted to clarify that for people because we tell them don't be putting fresh horse manure down on your garden, like thinking
no way.
You're gonna be growing plants like crazy. It's got
horse manure is bad, but you could put month-old horse manure. Horse manure definitely is one of the ones that's ready sooner than other ones, because horse manure is very low compared to other four-legged animals. Is very low in nitrogen. In fact, it's so low in nitrogen it's almost a problem. You really should amend it I know when I lived in the desert, we would amend it with hippie pea, right? So we take fermented hippie pea and we put that on the horse manure and we let that sit for 3 months and we turn it. And after 3 months, we put it in the raised beds. We mix it about 30% with the local, basically what amounted to sand. That was the local gravel and the local soil. And that gave us the local microbes plus the, a good base that we needed to grow whatever we wanted. And sometimes we put a little straw or whatever else in, but it grew really well. We grew, a whole wide range of crops with something just using hippie pea and horse manure,
So would it be safe to say that still, like I like to teach, you need to, compost this for a year to be on the safe side, but unless you have a bunch of hippie pea or you're an expert grower, you might want to compost it a little longer to be safe. That's what I was thinking, but I'm glad we brought it up because I think that's important for people to know there are options or ways you can implement it. Like, Chris was saying, basically I took as, well, you could dust your field with some compost. I mean, some fairly fresh manure, but you don't want to just dump piles of it on and cut it in because it'll just tear it.
Yeah, but dusting with fresh manure on the surface when you already got crops growing or stuff, you got to be careful with that. So in my scenario where I'm taking, active soil, I'm turning it in, I got IMO, which is
right,
tons of microbial life, a little bit of fresh really it wouldn't be a problem. I wouldn't be worried about pathogens if I had a small amount,
Well, that's what I meant actually, is you kind of dusted into it and then you turned it in, but it wasn't large quantities. You used a very light quantity and then you turned it in. I'm sorry, I didn't clarify that correctly to you.
Yeah.
So, right.
I didn't have any fresh, but I was just mentioning that I wouldn't have minded just because of the kind of activity that I would have got out of it. Right. Especially here, it's cold right now. It's next week is really the earliest you would want to plant here. We're kind of risking it, throwing some stuff in the ground, and my wife's getting a little disenfranchised as we got a late frost and some of her cucumbers she put in didn't make it. And so we're pushing at that plant as soon as you can line.
We discussed that earlier in the show too, about planting too early. And if you get lucky, it's great. And if you get a frost, you're screwed. Yeah. And the wife gets disenfranchised.
I'm okay with, but my wife hasn't been gardening all that long. And so she's kind of like, what? We made all these starts and now they're dead. And, I'm like, it was a risk. We took it.
Welcome to farming.
Yeah.
That's a great story. Hey, you're Chris Trump. How is our plants dying?
Yeah, I thought you were some kind of soil guru. No, I'm just kidding.
Have control over the weather.
Having fun with Chris Trump of natural farming.
Fix it. No, I'm just kidding. What other types of maybe non-traditional KNF stuff out there? I thought it'd be maybe cool for you to touch on PSB. And then I thought it'd be cool for you to touch on maybe some of the IPM based IMO stuff out there, or IPM based KNF stuff, because that isn't talked a whole lot about in other circles of KNF.
Yeah, one of the things that is kind of a favorite thing that isn't really talked about is just using IMO to make compost. So in natural farming, they say fermented mixed compost, but it's not like anything, exclusive to natural farming. It's just composting. But to have a, really active or really strong microbial base in that IMO to start with your compost. So whatever you're composting, horse manure or steer manure or hippie pea, or what resources, or wood chips, and and whatever it is you have access to, something with high nitrogen, but taking a little bit of IMO and adding it to a large quantity of compost, and that's kicking it off with this huge amount of diverse microbial life. I love that. Basically, I got a bag of IMO sitting around, and I'm getting ready, and I got, oh, what resources do I have available to me this year? You know, what resources are in my area? What do I have to improve my soil? Taking that, making a compost pile, and bringing in some of that IMO. It's kind of just a really great way to do composting, where you're getting this huge amount of growth because you already have this kind of fungal, bacterial rich microbial inoculum, and now, you know, it's just processing or fermenting that material. So I got bags of it in storage of IMO. Here's one right here that I'm almost done with, but I took kind of the last bit of my horse manure because I was running low on this bag, and I threw it into this bag here. And so now as we put out our fresh starts, I'll take a little of this IMO and aged horse manure and throw it around, or I'll put it on top of where we're seeding or whatever. But yeah, fermented mixed compost is just this concept of composting, but using, you know, tons, instead of just relying on whatever's on that plant material. You know, say you got wood chips and some cuttings from your, you know, trees that you chipped up, or, you know, whatever it is, some high nitrogen. Instead of just relying on whatever microbes are present in that to do your composting, you're bringing in IMO to start. So it kind of amends whatever you have available. So I do that all the time. I do that on a large scale in our farm in Hawaii. We take, you know, we'll get sometimes fish bone meal or tons of macadamia nut husk, our byproduct, and then we'll just cover it with a light amount of IMO, and we get just beautiful mycelial growth over this whole, you know, 500-yard windrow that we're turning with a compost turner, just because we kind of inoculated it, if you will.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You basically just inoculating it and let it spread, let it grow,
yeah,
live. Yeah. Right? I mean, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, we're just kind of jump starting.
That's what I was thinking.
Know that. Yeah, exactly right. So that's one, and one I use all the time in different ways. It's kind of like, what can I ferment, you know, with composting. In this garden, we basically did that. You know, these raised beds are brand new this year. I got my kaleettes going in here. It's getting dark, so you can't see them, but kaleettes right here coming up. And this is, you know, rabbit manure, chicken manure, horse manure, local soil. So I mined some of the best soil on the property, little bit of potash, you know, just from our fireplace, just everything we had available around here, and IMO 3, and we mixed it in this bed and let it ferment here, and then planted into it. You know, this is young. You know, if it was ideal, this would be a year old, and I would have grown stuff on it, and next year it'll be better. But the reality is, today is the day I have, you know, and I want to grow stuff this year, and stuff's growing well so far. So it's you know, that ability to bring in microbial life because we have some that we've kind of cultivated out is great. PSB, Steve, might be just like senior moment here. I got some white in my beard, but I cannot remember that acronym.
Phosphorus solubilizing bacteria, the purple stuff, blue stuff.
Oh yeah. That's right. That's right. Well, you probably are better to talk about that than me, as you played with it like crazy. I think I would call you more of an expert on that than me by a long shot. So
I love your humility.
I'll pitch that one back to you.
That's why we love Chris.
Well,
He's
you know
got
what?
humility.
I was planning on doing a video on that anyway, but generally you mix egg white with fish sauce, and what is the other ingredient? I'm forgetting off the top of my head. It's been kind of an insane week for me.
See, he was looking at you, Chris.
I can't help you out here. I don't think I've ever made that one. I saw yours and I played with it a little bit, but
Oh
can
no,
jump
so the stuff that I made actually was isolated phycocyanins, which was a wholly different thing than what I'm talking about. So they actually use a cyan, I believe it's a cyanobacteria with the phosphorus solubilizing bacteria. But so we'll skip that one. But
All right, sounds
but
good.
what about some pest management, KNF? I know we had talked a little bit about that when I was in Africa. Do you want to talk about that at all on the show?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's probably my favorite part of Jadam. So Cho Young Sun is Master Cho's son. So there's Cho Han Kyu, who we call Master Cho, and his son is Cho Young Sun, and he went to school for chemical engineering, but he's taken a lot of dad's principles, and he
Awesome.
wants to make them simpler, cheaper, and really love his heart in that, really to make things, the more accessible he can make it for the farmer, the better. I in the microbial creation world or aspect, I stick with natural farming because I think we can get a more rounded and complete product. He does some things with putrefaction to break down or to ferment, and which is effective for getting access to nutrients from crops, but also a little sketchy if we're going to pass some organic certification or food safety marks, because I'll be dealing with the potential of just high E. coli numbers, etc. But his pesticide suite is quite amazing, and I really believe that's something to play with and something to learn about for as a tool in the toolkit for an organic farmer. And
Wow.
that is, sorry, go ahead.
So he's gone into chemical engineering, but he's going to apply it organically, where he's just going to be able to break it down better than it's been broke down before.
So go ahead. So what are some of the different KNF products that are out there? So for instance, I've experimented with putting insect frass both in the rice when making IMO, and then also in IMO 3 per your suggestion.
Yeah, that's great stuff. So the idea that we can grow out microbes on a food source is such a cool thing to play with in general. And the reality is that so many, especially in the kind of beetle category or insects with a carapace, so many of them have fungal predators. So in the natural world, there are tons of fungal predators for pests and microbes in general that predate on these insects that we kind of are having to deal with as farmers. And so to take a huge swath of indigenous diverse microbes and to give it access to carapace or or the whole insects that are in your area. I did it, my first experiment with it in Hawaii was using kind of weevil infested rice bran or wheat bran, and seeing just the microbes go nuts on the insects. Now being able to spray that in your growing area, all of a sudden you have this microbe present that's going to attack these proteins, these chitin so one of the microbes is a chitinase producing microbe, right? Is that am I saying that right? It might be that chitinase is the byproduct.
I think that's
but yeah. And so with IMO, you have you're aiming at diversity, this huge amount of diversity that's appearing in nature, to then give them access to this food source of like insect frass. being one example. You're now kind of selecting for a microbe that likes to chew on your beetles or your carapace welding insects. I have one of my students is a golf course manager in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Oh, wow.
And he manages the most played golf course in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's not the most expensive golf course, but they have huge amounts of traffic, and his budget is really low for amendments. And so he came out to a class in Boise, and he took it back, and we've been talking for the past, I think 3 years now. And he has an entire natural farming protocol for all his greens, and his greens are beautiful. He never has fungal problems. He uses 0 insecticides or fungicides or herbicides, and he has beautiful, immaculate greens, and they're organic. But we also talked about this, and he uses insect frass in his IMO3 now, just when he produces it. Then he makes tea with that insect frass IMO3, and he has this kind of pressure on the bug population that just naturally remains there because he has these microbes that love to chew on the chitin of the insects. And so it's definitely something to play with and see what you can get access to. I think it's a great way to go. If you overdo it, or if you apply not overdo it. Let me rephrase that. If you apply this foliarly with a like a tea or something, beware that plants can sense chitin, the proteins present in these insects, and they may react to this spray if you're spraying it foliarly, and with an immune response, where basically they're thinking, if we can call plants thinking, they're thinking, I'm about to be infested with an insect infestation. I need to respond. And so one of the responses that happens in the plant kingdom is, I need to reproduce. I need to make babies because I'm about to die. And so plants will jump into flower. Will jump into flower and fruiting protocols, and so you might get kind of a jump start or a jump into flowering, and if it's not the right time for you, just beware of using something with a lot of kind of chitin in it, because you can get a kind of immune response from a plant. On the positive note, and that might be positive if somebody wants to boost flowering, but also on the positive, it does kind of ramp up a plant's natural immune system. So it will kind of work on kind of anti-bug biochemicals, etc.
That's pretty neat. That's neat.
Yeah.
Something to look into, like you said. Here we are on the show, and we're all going, well, this is just new, and here, everybody needs to jump in here and look and see what we need to do and how you might be able to use this information.
Yeah, play with it. How did it go for you in Africa, Steve, as you played with that stuff? What kind of, I mean, it's hard to tell if you don't have a bug infestation, but.
So we did IMO1, where we put insect frass in the rice, and then when we did our collections, and then converted that to IMO2 and turned it into liquid IMO and applied it directly to some grasshoppers we had collected. We did the same thing with IMO3, where we converted IMO3 to liquid IMO. And we did not have time, unfortunately, to do an IMO4 because of the virus. But between the IMO2 and the IMO3, the IMO2 seemed to do a better job than the IMO3 did at killing insects. Granted, it was very fresh IMO2. Full disclosure, we made that IMO2 immediately and converted it into liquid IMO, immediately after converting it into IMO2. So full disclosure there. But that seemed to do a better job at killing the grasshoppers when put inside of a giant, gallon jar and applied as a liquid IMO directly to them, just as a test sample in Africa, than the IMO3 did, meaning that it saves me a whole separate step.
From weeks.
Yeah.
But
That's
It
huge.
doesn't, again, IMO 4 could work better. Again, I did not have the time to do that. It needs to be fleshed out further. But in preliminary testing, IMO 2 seemed to work pretty well as long as it was fresh.
How much in your playing with it, what percent kill of the grasshoppers did you get with that IMO 2?
We killed almost 80% of them.
That's cool.
That works
Yeah,
pretty
that's
good.
because that was our number one thing. Them and army worms and cutworms are the three things that we have to kind of deal with that we don't deal with here. There's a bolo worm or a bolo moth that we also have to deal with that we don't deal with over here. But in general, the grasshoppers and the cutworms are the two big ones.
Yeah.
Well, that's great news.
And
'Cause we got cutworms here a lot. Like if we try to do corn, anytime, because I'm not a corn farmer, but when I try to grow some corn, I have a problem with cutworms. So that's really nice to know. I can do some IMO too, you know.
Yeah, I would highly suggest anyone looking to do the IPM KNF, incorporate up to 35% insect frass with your rice when you do your initial collection with your IMO, same as you would traditional IMO 1 collection, and then convert it into 2, 3, and 4, and then make your liquid IMO from those. And use them just the same way as you would as a foliar application, but it works very well against grasshoppers in particular, in my personal experience.
Are you talking about adding it after you cook the rice, or in the rice when you cook it?
Yes, so I'm talking about even when cooking the rice. Yes.
So you put it in with the rice when you're cooking it.
Yeah, cooking in with, I mix it 35% with the rice.
Okay.
Before we even cook the rice, when it's still raw rice.
Right. Then you cook it all together. That's
Yeah, I will rinse the rice first.
Yeah.
But I'll mix it in. Once I rinse the rice, we'll mix it 35% by mass, or by volume rather.
Then you take
The
and
cool
make labs
thing-
with your rinse. Yeah.
The cool thing with that too is applying that, generally that stuff's sticking around. So as much as you get that spray on kill, you're also getting that something that lives in your area, was thriving wherever you collected your IMO 1, and now as you apply it in your growing area and a grasshopper shows up, it'll get predated, or its eggs will, if it's laying them. And so you're applying it to kill, but you can also kind of reliably expect to get kind of a residual benefit as that stays in your cropland. That's cool.
So as the egg cycles go through, it'll take care of them too. Yeah.
And I think really its strength is if you're a clandestine grower, or you're as I prefer to call them, a less than legal grower, or a grower that's growing in an area that maybe, say I'm just a vegetable grower and I'm in Zimbabwe. It's brutal for me to export or import chemicals to that part of the world, or even biologicals. Right now, currently in Zimbabwe, I can't even get biological insects, beneficial insects, to my farm in Zimbabwe because they closed the border with South Africa. So this is why having a KNF fallback and producing your own IPM products on property and not having to rely on those types of things. If I'm in Jamaica, if I'm in Barbados, if I'm in any of these places that I've worked on with different vegetable farmers and aquaponics, they can locally harvest their own IPM IMO in their local area, even in Barbados, and then produce a local, pesticide that is designed for their local property, that has no negative impact with the local environment, that is already evolved to live in their environment, in their climate, that will just, do very well and eliminate grasshoppers and a whole range of other insects that doesn't cost them money. And again, they don't have to worry about things like the COVID virus shutting off borders, because they're just producing it themselves. So this is where, a lot of the strengths of things like Korean natural farming, being able to produce your own IPM, being able to produce your own fertilizers and your own supplements and your own soil amendments with the Korean natural farming, with the whole wide suite of them, really, shines, especially in a moment like the moment that we're in currently with the virus and everything else.
And I think it also has a lot to do with like people like me, where I don't have tons of money. So I can buy products that I have done in the past where I was a hydroponic farmer, but now I live in a swamp. I can basically make everything I need to make. following, Master Cho's and Chris's guidelines and stuff. So it saves me tons of money in the end. And as we all know, once you get these gardens going in 3 or 4 years, it comes down to a smaller maintenance situation instead of where you're doing all the work up front and then you maintain it, right? I mean, if I've got this all correct, down the years we won't have to produce as much. And that's something I like. If I can have another question, when we talk about how we use lactobacillus and FPJ, I would like to talk about how, because everybody, let's face it. Oh, hold on just a minute. I got something for you, Chris. Hold on.
All right.
Is there any other stuff that you're cooking up? You don't have to necessarily tell us what you're cooking up, but you got some other KNF stuff that you've been experimenting on or working on in the lab there?
I am playing with things, and truthfully, if I could do that a lot more, I'd probably end up with a farm for profit space and a whole lot of research, because I think that's gonna push forward the whole community, being able to kind of hear some reliable directions. Hey, there you go.
Okay.
You sipping on that a little bit?
So this is what takes months to make. So you buy this from Chris at naturalfarming.com.
You can make it yourself.
You can make it yourself, but it doesn't take months, really.
It does take months.
It takes months. So you got to just go if you want to get but we know that everybody, the first thing they do is they make labs and make FPJ. But then everybody says, I've talked to like hundreds of people and I drench my ground, I do this, I foliar spray all this. Could you just give a little bit of insight? Because this show was actually we were kind of doing a theme of beginner stuff again tonight. And then you tied right back into it with we already talked about the plant trying to save itself. So it reseeds and all. So you tied right back into that earlier. But so for our beginning KNF people that, aren't available to go and take your class or whatever, when you make your labs and your FPJ, what are the best ways to apply it to use on a new garden? And then, of course, you need to buy this OHN, organic herbal nutrients, and then you'll be set. I mean, and that you need and start your IMO collection. But so where are we at with that, with all that said?
Yeah, I guess more starting with kind of a philosophical or just a kind of word of caution. These nutrients we're making are a part of growing a crop. It doesn't necessarily mean that because you have LAB and FPJ that you have all the nutrients you need to have a gangbuster crop. You're still applying farming techniques. So you see me, I'm out there and I'm getting horse manure from my neighbor. Well, I didn't make that in a KNF input, but farming, I know I need a little energy in the ground, Now it doesn't mean the grass won't grow without it, but I'm not growing grass this year. I want to grow beautiful melons, and I got some seeds to grow 1,000-pound pumpkin. I'm going to need to push on that a little bit. If I want that 1,000-pound pumpkin seed to produce 1,000-pound pumpkin, I'm going to apply some nutrients. So you can use FAA. FAA also takes a long time to produce, and that's just taking some local fish heads or something that you get from your fishermen, or your local sushi restaurant. Sometimes they'll give you their fish heads and guts and stuff, and you can produce your own kind of high nitrogen material. But you're going to need to be bringing in some sort of food or pre kind of mixing in some sort of some kind of carrying food for a really productive crop. And so we talk about these nutrients, and sometimes one of the pitfalls for people is, all I need is maintenance solution, which I talk about it also in a YouTube video, and I'm going to have lots of production. It's like, well, that maintenance solution is really important. You're going to get healthier disease resistance, and yes, you'll get it is somewhat feeding the crop, but really you got to consider, especially if you're just starting out and you don't have this IMO rich, super deep soil with all kinds of worm activities and the microarthropods and the nematodes all going at full tilt, you're going to need to bring in a little kind of preload food, if you will. And so just kind of whether you're making a fermented mixed compost like we talked about earlier, or bringing in some sort of, you know, nutrient source to kind of get that production up, especially initially with kind of new soil or new land. I think I just wanted to speak to that, you know, that, you know, yes,
Yeah,
bringing
you set the
in,
basis for saying you have to have nutrition aside from these inputs.
well,
I mean,
so if I've been farming on land for 3 years with IMO, and I've been applying my organic matter, and I'm, you know, I've got my soils clicking along, I'm actually probably not going to need to bring in any manure and still
Right.
get a lot of production.
right.
I'm going to be spraying FAA and stuff, and kind of in the cycle of the plant's life, applying proper nutrients, and I'm going to get yields. But going back to beginners, or this concept of starting out,
Right.
you don't think that just because I have LAB, I'm going to get high yields. You know, I've seen a little bit of that, where, oh, I'm going to call this KNF, so therefore by applying a name to it, I have yields. And no, this is
It's just one input of a natural farming techniques and methods. It's one little tiny.
yeah, and
Yeah. So I wasn't saying that. I mean, just to say.
no, you weren't saying that. You weren't
Yeah.
saying that. I was speaking to
Oh, okay. You're just
some
going
of
back
what
to
I,
beginner thing. Okay.
yeah, some of what I've heard on the things I've heard on the
Oh, yeah.
internet
Go on.
kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what other
Do you
folks
want us
out there need to hear.
on that note, do you want to talk about the importance of IMO and how that's almost more important than labs in the scheme of things?
Well, can we finish up real quick? Because what I wanted to ask real quick. Like when you're starting out, do you use your lab? Like, here's what I get a controversy with people debating. Labs are either to drench the soil or to use foliar, or both.
Either or.
Okay, and
Either
FPJ.
or. Yeah, FPJ, either or. I mean, you can do soil drenches with these nutrients.
But it's better to foliar FPJ, isn't it? Or if you can. No?
You know, depends. I
Okay.
know that some people have concerns with, especially in cannabis, have concerns with flavor. You
Right.
know, so say I'm growing with a bitter, you know, my FPJ is a bitter dandelion FPJ, and I want to bring that in as food, but I don't want that bitter dandelion flavor to be affecting, you know, an isolate or some sort of, you know, smokability flavor.
Terpenes.
Yeah, I hear that. And so,
Okay.
yeah,
what I was
soil
asking.
drench is great, and soil drench still is very effective. Yeah. So
Okay.
it's kind of depends on your scenario, your operation. I think in vegetative growth phase, I think foliar is great and
Yeah,
highly
we all
effective.
do. Yeah. Okay, that's exactly all right. So that's what I kind of thought. I just wanted I wanted to hear you say it because we've never really touched on that basic. It's like you make this, everybody's all excited about. So I yield to Steve. Wanted you to talk about IMO, and I'm all with, because we know IMO is the key, you know, in the end, I think.
Yeah, I think IMO, the reason or part of the key is plant nutrient uptake. So Elaine Ingham taught me how to use the microscope, and one of the things she'll say is that we have thousands of years of nutrients in whatever soil you want to look at. It's all there, tied up in minerals, but they're not available to your plant. So whatever you got in your soil, Steve was talking earlier about a sandy soil and, you know, applying stuff. Sand is silica, you know, full of silica. Everybody's like, oh, I need silica. It's like, well, all of a sudden, if you have highly diverse fungal life, you're going to be mining the silica out of your sand and making it available to your plants just by those guys being present and communicating through that biochemical exchange that they do in the soil and in the root zone. And so IMO, you know, whether you call it IMO or you're on another trip and, you know, another method, and whatever it is, getting diverse microbial life, a fungal community that's thriving, and not just one species. Ultimately, I'm leaning towards as much diversity as possible.
Right.
I'm going to get this mineral uptake and nutrient uptake from soil. That's LAB doesn't do that. LAB doesn't mine the mineral from rock. LAB will clean up. LAB can help you kind of fight off some pathogens. LAB does tons of wonderful things, but when it comes to taking raw materials and mining them into micro minerals for nutrient uptake in the root zone, we need that fungal life, that fungal diversity. So that's why IMO, or again, if you're not Korean natural farmer, just getting in that diverse fungal community is so key. And if I understand it right, and I, this needs to be dug into further, more research is needed, but the cannabis plant is wanting in the realm at least a 30-to-1 fungal to bacterial ratio, and maybe a lot more. And I think that, and it might be strain specific, and we, that may need to be played with. It does need to be played with, but if you don't have fungal life in your root zone at all, I think that's maybe priority number 1, 2, and 3, in my opinion. And so, yeah, IMO I think is really key, and it's really doable too. There's a learning curve, but definitely doable.
Well, the
I
30-to-1 ratio makes it totally puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
The bacteria that lab has is with the bacterial, how it's a clean bacteria that cleans out bad bacteria, right? Basically, it allows a network. But you need that fungal network is 30 times more important, so to speak.
Mhm.
Maybe
Mhm.
you need both, but one, yeah. So that's what, yeah. So that's all right. So I'm sorry. I give it back to you what you were
No,
saying.
exactly right. Yeah, if you want to put it in those terms, the fungus is 30 times more important. Yeah, I think
Is
that's a
there
good way of putting it.
is there any other ways aside from IMO that people can do, to boost their fungi and their fungal percentages in their soil?
Yeah, there's some products. You got to be careful with products claiming fungal life, because generally they don't really have it. There's a lot of fungal claims in bugs in a jug that you can buy, and when looked at in reality, are lacking the fungal life that they claim. So I'd be aware of fungal inoculums that you buy in the store, but you can basic composting, getting some wild materials, or materials that are not gnarly, roadside sprayed stuff, but if you can get just good materials, you can compost just a good kind of aerobic compost. I like static composting for the lazy farmer. So static composting is this idea of you want to stay in the realm of 70% high carbon material. So think like 70% wood chips, maybe 10% green, and 20% high nitrogen, or something like that. But staying up in that 70% range of woody material, you turn it all in once, maybe apply some natural farming nutrients if you have them. Some sea salt would be great. If you have some, sea salt, mix it into water, because that'll help the microbes break down the wood chips. But then you get all that woody material, mix it up, and let it sit for the year, and that's your next year mining zone for high value compost. But it's by keeping that fungal content really high, you don't have to turn it. So you make it once, and it's called static. You leave it there, and that's a great way to get some fungal life going on your property, or going in your area. And farmers are busy, so being able to come back to that, make it now. And it's kind of hard to talk about these things that you wait a year for, but start today, and it'll be here before you know it. Also, I kind of caution, I'm kind of cautiously suggest this, because I don't want people to get in trouble, and I don't want the raping of beautiful forest zones. But you can go out with a little bag and collect some beautiful mycelium on your nature walk, and you know, stick it in a little cloth bag you carry like Johnny Appleseed, and come back down and throw it in your tea brew next time, you know, and don't brew it too long, and make sure you don't have any you know, molasses or fish in your products, in your tea when you brew it. But or just apply that right on, you know, if you have a small grow or something, you know, sprinkle that around your plants, put it right on the surface, and put a little bit of mulch on top of it and water it in. You can get it to establish just by bringing a tiny handful down. And once established, it's really not going anywhere. And that doesn't mean that everything you grab from wherever you go will self-perpetuate in your land. But generally, especially if you're farming outside, but even if you're farming inside, that fungus has made connection with those yeast and bacteria that you have floating through your air. So that is already plays nicely with the yeast and bacteria in your area.
I
So
saw where
if someone-
somebody did that with
if-
hugel beds when I was researching it recently, and they did the same thing. They just put the mycelium and buried it at the bottom, you know, on wood. They'd find wood with mycelium. And now that's all I wanted to say, Steve. You go, you know, that's so I thought that was kind of neat.
If someone were to collect, you know, mycelium in their local area and then propagate it with compost tea, what would you recommend to add in addition to water and mycelium to that tea and aeration in order to propagate that?
Yeah, and Roger, you brought up a good point that I'm going to answer Steve's question, but I just wanted to touch on. I highly discourage from burying it.
From burying?
Yeah, don't.
Okay.
I discourage people from burying it. Putting it under a little bit of mulch to get it away from UV, totally great. But putting it 10 inches under the soil or anything like that, that's I discourage that, because a lot of these microbes, these specifically fungal microbes, they live in that top few inches of the soil, and they love oxygen. And so burying them, you're going to get less. They'll go down. But
no, I got what you're saying, though. Yeah, you put it on after you get your bed. You might bury some wood logs, but then you want to have this at the top underneath the mulch. And so I might even misinterpreted that too. So I'm glad you did bring it back to that, because I never want to steer anybody wrong with that. You know,
is there sugars or is milk or anything else particularly good for? You know, propagating fungi in particular, or what are maybe additives that are particularly good for cultivating fungi in particular?
So I love FPJ for cultivating fungi in a tea, because it has all this kind of beneficial plant biochemicals and these nutrients that we don't actually. It's like liquid compost. And we don't know, we're beginning to scratch at what fungi eat, you know, and I know there's a lot known, but there's also a lot of things we don't know. They have a really hard time of getting them to grow out on our identifying an ideal auger for fungal growth. And that's because of our limited knowledge, and especially then you getting into species. But in my hypothesis, if you will, based on some great papers and studies that were done, and my experience in, you know, focusing on fungi for the last 12 years, they like plant fats. They like fatty acids, basically the complex amino acids that form in cell walls of plants. They break those apart and break apart those amino acid chains, and they have acid byproducts like humic and fulvic. Bringing in humic acid and fulvic acids to your tea are positive. You can bring in a tiny bit of sugar. I would not focus very much on sugar. The only reason you'd bring in a sugar or a sugar type product would be to kind of kickstart some of the yeast and bacteria, because as those kind of ramp up, they're micronizing nutrients and fungi kind of they work in tandem. Fungi will tee off on what they're doing. One of the things I want to, Steve, I like your question. There's a lot of water. I think is a really valuable thing for cultivating fungi, just because they make use of all those minor minerals. But I want to actually shift a little bit to kind of a physical or a kind of mechanical thing for growing fungi out. I found in my growing microbes out in teas, seeing how I did, checking my work, looking in under the microscope over 10 years. And I'm got pretty serious about it. I did it over and over and over and over again for years and years. If I threw microbes into a kind of rolling water column, fungi into a rolling water column, I had fungal growth, but it had limited fungal growth. If I took fungi and put them into a sack or a bag, or I have stainless steel baskets that I use, then I would get drastically more. And I'm going to explain this. Sorry for the light. I actually want to show you guys a prototype example that I hand sewed for somebody so that you get an idea what I'm talking about. But fungi, they have structure. They have long strand bodies. And so if you put them in a water column and the water column's kind of roiling and broiling, they're constantly, as soon as they kind of start forming a body, they're constantly breaking apart. And they'll try again, but they're kind of losing energy, if you will, in all that breaking apart and the roiling and broiling. If you can give them something to kind of grow on, then they'll break off of that and continue to reproduce. But just by giving them kind of something to grow on, it helps them kind of not lose time and energy as they're producing their body and then kind of falling apart. So here is just an example of a compost tea bag. So you don't, if you're not going to put aeration in the middle of it, you don't want a big sack where you're getting a ball that's going to go, sit there and wait like a weight, and the center is going to go anaerobic, right? So you don't want a big ball of material, because what'll happen is the center will go anaerobic. So the ways to solve that is to put an air stone down into that so that it's kind of pushing all that material and not letting the center go anaerobic, or create something long and skinny where there's no kind of central space that's going to get overly big. So this is just made out of kind of marine mesh. And then I did a big plastic zipper on it. And I couldn't find anything I wanted on the market, so I made one. And so I sat here and sewed it by hand with some, marine type string. But by this being kind of long and flat, I can throw this whole thing into a boiling compost tea, and it can flop around, but it's not going to get a big ball in the middle. It's going to stay kind of spread out. And I would never fill this more than half, or at the most, 2/3. Yeah, so
you moved it around to kind of mix up again a little bit, and stay from keeping it from a ball. So yeah, and plus
exactly.
it's aerated plenty. Yeah, so got plenty of air. That's pretty neat. Another, yeah, I love it. Yeah, take a little marine cord and marine zippers. Huh?
That's really cool. We had a question from chat. It says, Chris, nice to hear what you're working on. Can you talk about alcohol content of KNF preparations, the rate and mode of use of the nutrients and biostimulants, and the alcohol, why the alcohol isn't a problematic with this? So I think he's mostly talking about why is it that the alcohol content isn't negatively impacting some of the different microbes. And
During
I know,
extraction, it sounds like
yeah, I know part of that is the fact that some of your alcohol in those tinctures is actually feeding your acetobacter bacteria, which actually love to feed on ethanols. But I'll let you talk more about that.
Yeah. I think specifically students of Lane have kind of come to question alcohol, and it's because of some of the stuff, the negative things that can happen in the, if a bunch of alcohol is applied to your soil. And I'm in total agreement with that, that if you apply a bunch of alcohol to the soil, you're going to have a cacophony of problems. Yeah, definitely in any plant or soil environment. That said, the typical rate of compost applied is going to have far higher alcohol content, minor alcohols that are produced in fermenting plant waste in a natural composting environment, which there's tons that are produced. They're very minor, and it's just part of the breakdown process. You're going to have more in applying compost than you're ever going to have in applying natural farming solutions. And that's because of the rate we apply alcohols in natural farming. So OHN is the only thing that has alcohol in it. There's minor alcohols that happen in ferments, just like kombucha or something, in the process of going from sugar to vinegar. Alcohols get produced sometimes in there. But in FPJ, the amount of sugar that's used is very important. So FPJ doesn't allow things to get into the alcohol content because we use so much sugar that there's actually not enough available water to produce alcohol. Now, if I took FPJ and I added 2/3 water to it, so 1/3 FPJ, 2/3 water, and I put it in a carboy or something with an airlock, I could totally produce alcohol. But as it is, there's so much sugar that I'm actually restricting that fermentation point from going very far at all. I'm kind of pulling on the contents of the plant and then stopping it because there's the equal weight of water is balanced by an equal weight of sugar. So there's what happens if you look at a sugar on a molecular level, it's basically perfectly suited to connect with a water molecule. And so all your water molecules get tied up by sugar and you can't produce alcohols at that state. So that's FPJ, but OHN, we use at a rate of 1 to 1,000. At that rate and the recommended application rate, yeah, I mean, we're putting on so little, it's in the realm of or less than homeopathic amounts. Those kind of things happen in soil. Alcohols at that level happen in leaf litter that happens in a forest environment, in the breakdown of, you think 2 leaves come together and get wet and start fermenting. Minor alcohols are produced. Those help break down cell walls, and that's part of the process of decomposition. So I don't think we're in anywhere near approaching kind of the problems that to your cropland, but I understand the concern. I just think that it's kind of like, what, you have alcohol in your applications, and it's runaway train with alcohol is bad, and it's like, yeah, I am completely behind and in agreement with that science of large amount of alcohols and the tons of stuff that can go wrong with that kind of scenario. But I think those red flags are going up for those people before understanding kind of the amounts we're talking about. And I think that just no concept of kind of what this looks like in a once a week at the most application of something diluted at a rate of 1 to 1,000 that's already, it's not 100% alcohol.
I'm glad
So,
you got to
yeah.
the ratio part because that's what exactly how I perceived it was when they, first of all, the alcohol is being used to extract the properties of the plant root in OHN. Over several weeks time, it evaporates. It's going to do its thing. There will be some alcohol content, but it's made into a concentrate that then, like you just said, you break it down 1 to 1,000. How much alcohol are you really applying to the plant at that point? It's very, like Chris said, that's what I love that you came right around to what I was thinking, which, you know, and I'm an amateur in this field, you know, but the way you explain it and the way you put out your videos has allowed a lot of us that are real interested to gain a lot of knowledge. And I love the fact that that you keep saying we don't know anything yet. You know, we're still learning, you know, it's like we got all this knowledge, but nothing's set in stone to an extent, right? But yeah, that was a great answer. I wanted to say that too. First thing I would have said, you know, was that we mix it 1,000 to 1, you know. There's a well, what would you, let me ask you this real quickly, because that was the thought. What's the alcohol content of OHN? Have you ever measured that? Of the concentrate itself? Like, what's the alcohol content in this bottle right here?
Probably in the realm of 30%,
30%?
25.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's even a little higher than I would have thought actually, but still you go down to 1 to 1,000. So to put that in perspective, you know, what is it when it's 1 to 1,000 ratio to water? So, you know, it's very little alcohol. Like and now I loved it too. That really helped a lot of people out. Like when you do, like even FPJ has alcohol. Well, you said you actually, all the sugar keeps you from having alcohol, but a lot of things when you compost, you actually do create an alcohol situation, or it creates alcohol. That's not something I've studied a lot on, but I found that very interesting. And by the way, while we're on it, my FPJ with dandelions, I took the cap and ate it like I call it dandelion candy. I don't see the real nasty taste of it myself. I loved it. My partner's 3-year-old son will pick a dandelion out of the yard and eat it because he knows he can eat it and it's good for him. Believe it or not, you know, thought you'd get a kick out of that.
Fun stuff. Yeah,
Sorry.
we couldn't make it to the store, so we did line on our BLTs. My kids weren't fans. You gotta cut if you want to use some of these wild plants. You gotta get the kind of young growth. Steve, are you gonna say something? And following up that conversation about alcohol.
I was just going to say that acetobacters are often used in both aquaculture and in the aquarium trade. You do something called vodka dosing, where you dose with vodka to reduce nitrates and reduce nitrogen. So you can actually use alcohol to reduce nitrogen. So say I'm coming into flower and I have higher than expected nitrogen in my soil, you could actually use alcohol to boost the level of acetobacters, which will then reduce the level of available nitrogen to the plant and actually use it as a nitrogen reducer, an organic natural nitrogen reducer rather than some other way of reducing nitrogen. So you can use them proactively. They're regularly used in aquaculture, even in reef tanks where you have coral and anemones and very sensitive organisms. We regularly use vodka dosing for keeping nitrates below 5 ppm. So
interesting, very cool. Actually, one more point that kind of comes up with this conversation that I think is just maybe an American. It might be just human nature, but I think probably is going to be most found in America. We talk about. I tell people a recipe of 1 to 1,000, and they go, "Oh wow!" If Chris is saying 1 to 1,000, then 1 to 200 is going to be like, 5 times better, because it's more concentrated. And
Nope.
people just they just do that. If Chris says you should apply this once a week, well, if I apply it every day, I'm just going to get that much better growth.
Yeah.
And I just, shame on you. Learn the system and use it the way it's taught. There's a reason. And so I just not shame on you, no shame. We don't we got enough of that in the world. But no, just, you know, I think people can run into a ton of problems if you take this concept and then say, hey, I'm just gonna, you know, quadruple the concentration because I want more growth, and don't do it. You know, take the caution you're hearing about alcohol as one of many reasons not to do it, because you're going to get weird stuff going on if you start dumping a bunch of, you know, OHN in your root zones. You will have problems. And so, yeah, I think that's probably where, you know, some of this has gone wrong, is, you know, and I think it's more just a concept of alcohol that's brought up these questions, but people just over concentrating or using this stuff is feathered on. It's at levels of homeopathy, and it's supposed to be there.
You're right, though. People like to overdo it. More light, they think more light makes everything grow better, and then they forget about the root zone. And yeah, like you said, I've run into people that said they mixed it 10 FEJ. I said, "What's your ratio?" They said 10-1, and I just said, "Dude, that's supposed to be like 1,000-1." You know, so yeah, it's amazing how people do it.
How I like to explain it is, so a lot of people, and we covered this, I think it was 2 episodes ago or 3 episodes ago when Scotty was on the show, the Mulder's chart, and how important it is to maintain your nutrients within a certain ratio, where your microbes are exactly the same way as your microbes. Your microbes need to be maintained in exact ratios of population. And if you do not maintain them in those specific ratios, you're going to have all kinds of chaos going on, the same way as you would if you had entirely too much phosphorus, or entirely too much calcium, or entirely too much sulfur, or entirely too much molybdenum, or whatever. You're going to have nutrient toxicity, right? Well, having too much of a microbe will cause nutrient toxicity in the same way, or some other toxicity to the plant, the same way that having too much potassium will. And people need to start thinking of it in that type of way. And I think if people start thinking of it in that type of way and making sure that they're raising everything within ratio, they'll start having much fewer problems, and they're going to be able to balance, maybe not necessarily balance themselves, but start thinking about things in a way that are more balanced and less likely to screw everything up. Because, you know, if I flood everything with way too much labs, it's no different than me flooding it with way too much trichoderma, right? It's going to dominate and it's going to wipe out the rest of my beneficials, and I'm not going to get the benefit of having a living soil in the first place, because 2/3 of my beneficial living microbes have been exterminated by the labs or the trichoderma or whatever that's just obliterating everything else. So this is again why ratios are important, and in looking at it, thinking of the same way that you do a Mulder's chart, but thinking about, instead of those nutrients, think about them as those different microbial groups in place of those nutrients.
And consider that all actions have a reaction, and that's exactly what Steve was just saying, and Chris was saying before that. By overdoing it, you're causing the plant to go into a defense mode, possibly, because the reaction is it's going, wait a minute, something's not going on right. So now I'm going to have to change, you know, just like we were talking about hermaphrodites or whatever earlier, you know, where the plant's going to react because you do that, you know. So that goes in. That, just simply say it, there is no, you know, reaction without an action, and by overdosing, you're going to cause the plant to try to balance it out.
Right. Funny story on balanced. You guys are talking about it, and Steve, you're bringing up Mulder's chart. There's this great tomato farmer in Waimea on the Big Island, and he's I think Wow Tomatoes, but he's teaching a bunch of people in Hawaiian homes in this kind of to use these greenhouses to produce tomatoes. And he uses greenhouses. He's traditional organic, so he's not using a bunch of microbes, but just a great farmer. And he had a sulfuric acid issue because basically we got an active volcano on the Big Island. And so everybody's crops were dying because, you know, that was in the air was kind of imbalancing everything. And so he wanted on he doubled up on other nutrients, and he had a great crop while everybody else's crop failed. And people are like, why would you, like, what made you think to, that's just not something that's done. You don't have a atmospheric event and put double amounts to balance it. Nobody does that. And so he's like, well, it just made sense to me. You know, he didn't learn it from somebody. He just kind of said, what would the plant need? And it was right back to that. He was bringing in balance. It was a fun story. He was telling that story, and it was great because it was so unconventional, you know, in his approach. But he takes and he preloads all these kind of troughs, if you will, and then mounds and plants tomatoes in, and he gets one harvest out of all of his tomatoes, and then he cannabis, kind of greenhouse, if you will, just because he gets, you know, some people farm tomatoes and they get multiple kind of takes. He'll get one crop and just yank everything out, and but yeah, fun that kind of balancing in the realm or the concept of Mulder's chart. I like it.
You broke up and phased out a little bit. So I think you said that because of the volcano, the air was actually affecting the crop. So he adjusted his nutrient input to counterbalance that, in his own opinion, and it worked.
Yeah, he doubled up on tons of nutrients. It was very cool. Good farmer.
So other than that, is there any other secret or unusual KNF recipes you'd like to share? And then after that, I'll share one.
Yeah, share another.
I mean, there's things I'm playing with. I'm actually going to send out some stuff to friends. I'll send one to you guys over there, Steve, and you can play with it and give me some feedback. There's a lot that needs to be played with. You know, natural farming isn't finished, as Master Joe said to me cruising along. You gotta keep going on it. But I am going to, you are going to be able to get access to an online class by this summer, which is cool. So I'm excited about that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I've been asking for 2 years. So.
Naturalfarming.co is going to have a full-on, you know, with a bunch of literature to go with your studies, where you'll be able to go through 40 hours of training, and really, for those that just can't travel to an in-person class, I still, for teaching agriculture, touching and tasting and smelling, I still believe in that as far superior. But everybody just can't be there, can't get, and that's, especially with the way the world is right now, you know, it made it make a little more sense. So I am going to do that. And additionally, in August, if you can come out, it's a pretty cool party, you know, and a bunch of growers that are successfully growing with natural farming will be there, past students, to answer questions and stuff. So there's a couple things I'm working on, and yeah, but no other tricky things. I have a lot of stuff that I play with that I'm interested in, but I've come by trial and error to realize that I got to be careful talking about those kind of things without complete explanation, because I just get kicked in the teeth with people doing things wrong and then saying, wait, and it's like, you didn't understand what I was saying. We'll talk more about those, Steve.
Well, we're on your side about that, because, you know, it's nice that you reach out and then you say, you know, it needs to be played with and all. And, you know, nobody can really blame you, because every grower has to learn to do this stuff for themselves. You know, no matter how much information you share, how many years you do it to share with people, you're always going to have those people that look for you to say, to try to turn it around to where you made a mistake and it cost them their grow. And they need to take responsibility for their own grow, because I don't know anybody that I know that, you know, kind of, I mean, you got your own business and all that, but you give a lot to a lot of people. I know for a fact, because I've been around so with you for a while now. And I can tell you, they can all kiss my butt if they think you made a mistake. And don't listen to Chris anymore then. Just don't listen to him. If you don't, you know, if you're not willing to own your own mistakes, just, you know, forget about it. Sorry, that's a southern redneck coming out of me, you know, defending my
I love it.
my
Let's
Yankee.
hear your stuff, Mr. Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Roger. I've come to learn to just like, I used to have a business teacher that said, like, water off a duck's back. You just let it roll off your shoulders. And
Yeah.
so I'm learning that. And I don't know, for whatever reason, sometimes I feel those things and hold, you know, let them affect me. But I think you're right. Just water off a duck's back with the stones that are thrown. Yeah, good
Well,
stuff.
you've shared a lot that people would charge for. Even all the how-to videos you did, the time it took you to do them. I mean, they're really nice, down to earth, homebody kind of things, and people love it. And you got a lot of followers, you know. So, you know, you're gonna have naysayers, but I guarantee you, that's all you're hearing is the naysayers. There's thousands and thousands of people out there going, "We love Chris for what he shares with us and what we've learned from him." And you know,
Thank you for that.
being fortunate, thanks to Steve, to being part of the show and having talked to you and seen you at the conferences we've been at before. It's been a real treat, you know, and seeing what you do, you know, I've you know, I fully love it. You know, the more you do, and I can't wait to do some of these tests and stuff like that. But I'll be selling some tickets to your online class when you get it going, because there's a
Thanks.
lot of us that can't make it up to Idaho, you know, especially even in August. We're still growing down here. That's only like the
No.
middle of the season.
Oh, I'm gonna try to make it to Idaho. That's for sure.
Yeah, I want to. I mean, there'd be nothing more I want to do than go to your farm in Idaho, man. I'm telling you. But I don't know if we
Yeah.
can do it. We'll have to see how the virus thing goes too. You know, that's a. I'm not going any. I'm going to be. I don't care what anybody says. I'm gonna
The T virus could be taking over.
Yeah, we'll just wait and see. I'm gonna play it safe until it's, you know, whatever. I'm just gonna grow my food here on the farm this year, and yeah. But I know in August I'll be, you know, that August is kind of funny. That's when it actually is hotter than shit, but it's getting ready to be cool any day. You know, so you get into that second wave where your produce kicking ass and stuff like that. You know, but
It'll be warm.
Huh?
It'll be warm. It'll
Oh,
be
yeah,
warm
dude.
out here in August.
Oh yeah, your place. Yeah, well, see, I'm in Carolina. You know, so you know, we don't know if you remember that or not, but yeah, believe me, it's warm here in August. No telling
It's
though, it
nice
might be
though.
50 degrees. Right now I'm in here, it's May, we're into May, and it's 50 something degrees outside right now. We're having the weirdest spring, or you know, it's just weird. Yeah, it's like it was 90 degrees 2 days ago. Today was 65, and tonight's in the 50s. So we might even get to the high 40s, you know, in frickin' South Carolina, you know, zone 8, like, you know, kind of, you know, so
Crazy.
weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I was bummed out. I had a frost last night and it wasn't on the forecast. Like, oh, it killed a bunch of things.
Yeah, that mama got upset. We heard,
Yeah.
I remember. I know how that is though. It's just the way. That's why we talked earlier about the date of starting things too. You know, learning how. One of the first things we talked about tonight was learning how to, you know, when to start and when to plant. You know, when to be able to plant safely outside. But you take a risk. You know, sometimes you take a risk, but it's all you got to tell the wife is that, hey, that's farming, and that's part of the fun of learning. That now you know it could happen good, or you could get killed by a frost.
You know, I've come to learn that you can tell people that's farming. You can tell people farming's hard. You can tell people there's a lot to learn with farming that you got to learn by doing. And until they start doing it, they don't have a clue what you're talking about.
The same thing is people out there farming is great. I love it. Wouldn't take back any of it in the last 15 to 20 years, but I'll say this. Do know this. If you actually get serious about farming beyond your little backyard garden or your indoor garden, there are no days off.
Hmm.
You'll never
That
have
that
to,
and you're gonna spill some.
So
Yeah.
so we
You're
had
gonna
a
steal
question. We had a question from chat. Is there any good brands or sources of insect frass that we recommend? His strawberries are yearning.
nice. Nice.
I'll pitch that to you, Steve.
If you want an off the counter one that you can get throughout the country, my go to would be Down to Earth. As far as I'm aware, they are the one with the largest distribution network that provides insect frass. As far as a singular company in the United States that I'm aware of, I'm sure there's a bigger one, but that's the biggest one I can think of off the top of my head at 11:30 at night. So I would say Down to Earth insect frass on Amazon is probably going to be your best bet.
Steve, what are these things you're working on? Tell me about it.
So I thought
about
I'd give you guys
secrets.
one. So I've been working on some phycocyanin isolate. I like to call it super labs, which is basically labs plus phycocyanin plus some of your other hormones you get from some other goodies. So we take 4 gallons of milk. We take 2 cups of seaweed or kelp extract, and then 4 cups of spirulina, and then put that all together. And then we also add either lactobacillus culture or kefir. If you can get kefir grains, either one will work just fine. And then you wait anywhere from 3 to 7 days, depending on temperature and the type of culture that you have. And it will separate into 3 separate layers. So you have your cheese on top, then you'll have your blue phycocyanin isolate layer, and then you'll have kind of like your milky or normal labs layer, because the phycocyanin will separate above the labs. And then you can siphon that off, and then you use that on your damaged plants or your moms, or your plants in veg, your plants in transition, and anything like that. And it'll rapidly accelerate plant growth immensely, because remember, phycocyanin is one of the most it's been a long day. One too many
All right,
dabs.
Bubba.
Phycocyanin is one of the most complex molecules for the plant to make in terms of getting to chlorophyll A through E, your chlorophyll groups. So by providing the plants with a baseline of phycocyanin via the root system or foliarly, you can dramatically accelerate growth rate. So by brewing your own and using lactobacillus to isolate the phycocyanin, you can organically make something that is not only really good for joint inflammation if you have arthritis, but it's also good for plant growth.
Awesome, man. Hey, real quick, can you tell me the ratios of those ingredients again?
Sure. So we use 4 gallons of milk with 2 cups of kelp extract or seaweed extract, depending on what you have available, and then 4 cups of spirulina extract, or dried powdered spirulina. And what the lactobacillus separates the phycocyanin and stabilizes it into a form that is separatable without having to use fire or flame.
That's awesome. Did you freeze?
What was the second ingredient?
Yeah, you can also to hippie. It's an amazing dye if you want to dye your clothing blue.
That's awesome.
What was the second ingredient again, Steve? Because I decided to write it down too.
Kelp extract and spirulina.
Kelp. Okay, that's what it was. Kelp.
Yeah. So the kelp extract, you're getting the hormones that help with the uptake, and the spirulina, you're getting the direct phycocyanin isolation. And the spirulina is your microbial mechanism of isolation. So again, this is why I like to encourage people, don't think about it KNF so much as a direct this plus this equals that. When you're first getting started, 1,000% just follow what Chris says and follow it to the T to get the results that you expect to get. But once you're comfortable doing that, then make a second batch separate from the one that you're relying on for production. And I want to emphasize that, separate from the one that
Right.
you're relying on for production
Yep.
or experimentation. Then make a separate grow plot with a control group. And I'm sure Wendy is listening to this somewhere. Just going, yes, thank you. With a control group that is equal in size to the one that you are using for your
Right.
test group. And then making sure that it's split 50-50, and then testing that with whatever you do. But test different things. If you're doing lactobacillus, I love adding things like horsetail. Horsetail is an incredible way to unlock silica and ferment that. You know, you can do rice shells in lactobacillus is another great way to unlock silica. You can do I've heard people doing comfrey and all types of other ones that you traditionally use in compost, but doing them in a lactobacillus ferment to make them rapidly available. And again, you can experiment with it and think of it like a machine where you can put in additional inputs to create all different types of isolated plant hormones and auxins and all different types of beneficial things that the plants will use and extract from other different types of plants. And you know, we know how well cannabis incorporates other types of compounds already. So this can be a great way to rapidly boost it. And I think that ultimately you're going to see a methodology with Korean natural farming where we can say, hey, I can make a water soluble potassium for my potassium input, a water soluble calcium for my calcium input, a water soluble phosphorus for my phosphorus input. And we can start replacing all of those synthetic nutrient inputs with ferments based on specific plant inputs. You know, think about it like this. Another great example would be stinging nettle. In fact, I have some right over here.
She's like me. Let me go run and get this out of the
There's some Baker Creek stinging nettle. Okay, you can get this on rareseeds.com or bakercreek.com. Okay, I can grow this and ferment it with some lactobacillus or even just an FPJ and unlock a whole lot of iron for my plants, as well as other minerals. So this is the type of way I think is the future of both not only aquaponics but living soil as well. You know, replacing a lot of the traditional mineral inputs with these types of fermented and plant-based inputs directly. And Chris and I were talking about this with potassium, but explain how that's kind of different methodology between thinking about ppms and just availability in general, or increasing uptake, because that was a great thing that we had talked about a couple of days ago that I think is really relevant to the conversation.
Yeah, you're asking me, you know, what's a ppm, and you're wanted for just so you don't get toxicity, but I'm just talking a little bit about looking after these things in the realm of ppm. You know, in conventional agriculture, for example, I can get a 30-30-30 fertilizer and throw it on. But the real important thing is how much of that is translated into yield or plant uptake. And the answer to that is about 20%.
Right.
In a conventional fertilizer. And that's expected and relied upon and acceptable based on, you know, just current farming practices. But with these ferments, you know, what you're doing is you're not cooking it, you're not applying some solvent to try and break something out where you're destroying, you know, beneficial biochemicals, etc. And these fermentations, especially these really controlled fermentations where you're using this specific amount of sugar so you don't go super high in alcohol, etc., you're preserving all of these nutrients. But then a process happens because of the microbes doing the work called micronization. It's a real word, and nutrients are micronized. In the plant kingdom, that's how nutrients work. That's how they're taken up and absorbed. And a lot of these nutrients are easily absorbed on foliar applications because of how fine the particles are, and because the process they came through to get there is a natural process, a process where they're they're in their proper ratios, if you will. If you apply some solvent, you might pull out a nutrient, but it still then needs to be broken down to be available to the plant. You know, there's another step. Whereas the micronization through fermentation, you have this kind of ready food. And so to take something like nettle or some these FBJs, or to extract using acetic acid, you know, some of this potassium, or just take potassium into water through that biochar process we talked about at the beginning of the show.
That's cool.
You know, these are highly available. So instead of you getting 20% and the rest of it being latent in the soil, and you hope you get it on your next crop, you're getting most of it taken up, you know, or instantly available, even if it's not all, you know, some of it falls off the leaf or something, but you're getting it taken up, or 100% available, if you will, because of the micronization through that microbe fermentation, or just the kind of breakdown or solubilize. That's why we call WCA or WCAP for calcium or calcium phosphate. It's water soluble, which is just not something you can really buy off the shelf. You don't get that kind of availability on typical products.
Yeah, typical. You can get chelates and stuff though.
So can you go over that water soluble potassium again? And is there any other alternative ingredients people could use if they don't have access to sunflowers? Or what was the first one that you mentioned?
So sesame stalks, you can use. The two that I kind of identified is just my kind of addition to what I learned in Korea based on an American kind of growing environment. We typically don't have a lot of sesame being grown. Sesame is grown like crazy in Korea. So what's readily available to us, I think most of the country produces sunflowers like it's, you know, there's just tons of them. They're everywhere, especially in Idaho. But they grow like crazy. Sunflower, especially the head, you know, where it's producing seed, but also the stalk is full of potassium. So is asparagus. So asparagus, if you're growing an asparagus, there's a big kind of you let some of the foliar asparagus go to seed and produce kind of vegetative growth. You don't harvest 100%, so that it's photosynthesizing and adding energy to that plant root system. At the end of the season, or even at the beginning of the season, you can take some of that big head and biochar that. That's a great thing to use. I'm sure there's more. I don't have any off the top of my head at the moment, but look at the potassium density of those two plants and find something comparable if you're looking for something in your area, or those three plants. And yeah, it's so go ahead.
And we've talked about this too before. In fact, I'm pulling it up as we speak. There's a really good spreadsheet. I believe it was on Build a Soil or Soil King. I don't remember which one. Hold on. I put it up. I downloaded it and re-uploaded it to our file section. So it's under, it was put out by
plant nutrient density, plant specific.
Plant dynamic accumulators. Yes.
Yeah. That was a great spreadsheet.
Give me 1 second. So if you're looking for how can I boost XYZ nutrient, if you go to the Aquaponic Cannabis Growers Facebook group and you go to the files section, so it's called the Dynamic Accumulators Nutrient Content file. It's put out by www.ars-grin.gov/Duke.
Duke University.
Yeah, by Duke University. And they put this lovely spreadsheet out. It has all the different nutrients. You can click on nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, magnesium, silicon, iron, molybdenum, boron. Wow. 1 second here. Copper, manganese, sodium. And then they also have comfrey listed separately as well. So it really gives you a wide range of things. Some of these are over 200 different plants that you can locally source. This one I'm looking at here now for calcium is they have over almost 800 different sources for calcium. So, depending on what it is that you're looking for, they have you covered. So definitely, if you're looking for other things to source for your searches, and you're going to try and figure out, hey, what can I ferment locally in my local environment that maybe I'm not in the United States, maybe I'm someplace else. You can go over to the Aquaponic Cannabis Growers Facebook group, click on the files section, click on that spreadsheet, and then find a plant that's on that list for each of the different nutrients, and then ferment that, and then again use that. Again, this is how we're going to replace a lot of the minerals that you're going to find in your bottles in the store.
That's awesome.
It's a great spreadsheet. And jumping in and hitting a drum, I'll hit forever. Probably keep it simple. If you can get a tons of microbial life and microbial diversity cycling and working in community in your soil, you're not going to see tons of nutrient deficiencies. You might still, if you send your soil away, see a soil test deficiency, meaning they'll say, hey, you're deficient in X, Y, or Z, manganese or something, but send this tissue sample away and you're not going to see that same nutrient deficiency in the tissue sample as you see represented in the soil sample, because you have plant root relationships with fungus that is mining and making available some of these minor minerals to these plants. And so yes, get these things we're talking about applying your calciums and your phosphorus and your potassium, and at the same time, if you can get your soil in balance and rich in diversity, you're going to have a lot less nutrient deficiency issues, even in what used to be poor soil. By the time you have that cycling and that level of diversity, we're not going to call it poor soil anymore.
Well, that's a whole new book of worms right there.
So I got one last question before we wrap up the show for you, Chris. So say someone's just getting started, maybe they're about to germinate their seeds, they're going to soak them in water, maybe seed sprout tea, and then put them into some seed start blocks, or put them in the soil and put them in their garden. What KNF regimen would they do for that first beginning? A lot of people are starting their seeds or have already started their seeds and are early stages of growth. What are maybe the first 2 stages or 3 stages of KNF for that initial stage? Should people use lactobacillic acid bacteria for seeds, or should they wait until they're post-germination? What should they use pre-germination versus post-germination with KNF inputs for that initial starting period?
Good question.
Great question. So what we use right in that beginning stage, think about so some of the natural farming theory is that it's kind of poorly translates from Korean to English, but the concept translates well, and is you and I are one. The concept that the animal kingdom and the
plant kingdom
are quite similar, and so taking cues and looking at these really over and over similarities between and the reality that we understand human life cycles better than we understand plant life cycles, because they're common to us, we live them. And so babies, when they are first born, what's the first nutrient they get if they're drinking, if they're eating from their mom? What's the very first nutrient they get? No, colostrum.
Colostrum. Okay, I was just guessing because milk.
Yeah, milk has calcium, and tons of fats and all that. No, the first thing they get is colostrum. It's full of minerals. It's not full of a lot of proteins and carbohydrates and stuff, and the fats. That all that gangbuster nutrients from milk comes in next, the first thing they get is colostrum. And so plants needing very little food in their seed stage and in their stage when they don't have true leaves. So I just strongly caution against overfeeding a seedling. So in natural farming, we'd use maintenance solution or seed soak solution. I have a video on it. It's just FPJ, brown rice vinegar, and OHN. FPJ 1 to 500, brown rice vinegar 1 to 500, OHN 1 to 1,000. And yeah, it's very light on food, but it's so yeah, you can soak your seeds in that pre-popping. We've done some studies where the plants benefit for their entire life cycle from that initial charge of this very minor food, but kind of plant nutrients. What I believe is it helps them have some goodies to bring to the party as they create relationships in their root zone when they go into microbial rich environments. But yeah, so feeding until they have a true leaf or two, not overfeeding them, letting if you can seed a few extras, but letting plants struggle a little when they're very young will help them produce better roots and kind of strive for nutrients. I'm not saying underfeed your plants by any means, but right in the beginning, I think a common problem is just kind of overfeeding. And then once they get those true leaves going, for those of you just starting natural farming, it's hard because you don't have some of this ready to go, but some fish amino acid coming into that FPJ, brown rice vinegar, and OHN could be great. Main thing though, if you can get your IMO process begun, start learning that, getting over that learning curve. And because having microbially rich and diverse soil is great. If you have nothing but LAB, that's a great soil conditioner, and it can help, especially if you're loading a bunch of nutrients into your soil. It can help kind of break down or make available some of those nutrients. Yeah, I think that's a good beginning explanation for people getting going. If you can get, if you don't have IMO initially, a great substitute, in a pinch is vermicompost. The higher quality, the better. If you can get something real, you have a friend with a vermicompost bin. I think vermicompost can help with some good microbial life, but also kind of nutrient rich, but still in balance. Worms kind of help keep things in balance in their own environment. So decent vermicompost can be a good substitute if you don't have IMO.
Nice. Yeah, somebody from chat says breast milk is the indigenous endocannabinoids.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to join us. Why don't you tell everybody how to find you and what you're up to tomorrow?
Yeah, you can find me at Soil Steward, STEWARD. On Instagram, you can find me on Facebook. And I have a company, Natural Farming Co., or a company, and you can find that at naturalfarming.co. There's a bunch of free downloads on there, especially when people are just getting started. What materials do I need to make LAB? And it's just kind of simple material lists, like get a strainer, get a, all the stuff to kind of put together so that you're not running around when you already got stuff ready to strain or whatever. And then some of the videos are linked there. You can also find me on YouTube if you search Chris Trump. And yeah, tomorrow I'm going to talk from 12 to probably 2 with Tina. Her Instagram tag is at Lala Grows. And then from 3 Mountain Time, I'm talking Mountain Time, so I don't know where you guys are, but from 3 to 5, I am going to jump on with the Future Cannabis Project and talk with them about a whole bunch of things. So that will be, there's some, people that have some issues with natural farming sometimes are on that show, or going to be talking to, and there's another really cool guest that I don't know. I've not before, but he's going to be talking about what he's up to. And so that tomorrow will be a whole bunch of talking about things. I think on the Instagram at 12, I'm going to walk around the place and show just some ideas for where to collect FPJ. And then I am going to demonstrate that WSK, water soluble potassium, on the show with her.
Wonderful. And for those of you guys that don't know, Future Cannabis Project has done a ton of amazing content. Chris and I both have done independent and joint videos together. We did a whole video on KNF and Aquaponics over on Future Cannabis Project. So if you're looking for great content, they're another wonderful source of education aside from Chris Trump's channel and myself. They are another great resource if you're out there looking for other people to learn from. So thanks again, Chris, for joining us. Roger, why don't you tell everybody how to find you?
You can call me at Latewood at ilovegrowingmarijuana.com. You can find me at ilovegrowingmarijuana.com. I have an Instagram account. I don't really do much there because I'm not able to post the way I want to. So I'm more keep up with my friends. But we have a Facebook account. And I also have started a group that's really kicking off. And actually, it's going to be neat with natural farming ideas and aquaponics. I kind of started a rain gutter grow system forum after I got banned from the original years ago on Facebook. And because I was actually trying to teach about growing a little bit more than the basic thing. And it's starting to, I'm getting like 35, 50 members a day requests. And they're starting to go crazy a little bit. So it's really neat because the whole idea is you put compost in a bucket basically with a net pot and wick out of a rain gutter, your moisture. So I was thinking, boy, K&F methods would really go great with that. Build up compost. So, I mean, it's doing compost, but then implement it like that, similar to what Steve and Marty and everybody's been doing with the dual root zone. Because that's basically what the dual root zone is, taking aquaponics and putting a root zone on top of the water flow and then feeding it with K&F and compost teas and stuff like that. So, so it's really becoming this whole idea of natural farming, regardless of what you call it, K&F, natural farming, whatever. Everybody's got a new name for it now because it's getting more popular every day.
Yeah, no, and to further back that up, I'll be talking about in my book, and I haven't talked about much of it publicly, but aquatic IMOs, and taking the same way that we think about doing IMO collection in soil, and applying it to aquatic soil and aquatic microbiomes, and collecting those local mineralizing bacteria from your local waterways in a way that still keeps you pathologically safe. And I've been working on testing a whole wide range of those things, and I'll be revealing a lot of that in the book we'll be releasing in the second half of this year.
Awesome.
Neat, because we're looking forward to that. Because I live in an area where there's water everywhere. I got canals, rivers, and lakes all around. And
if you look at aquariums and aquaponics, everyone talks about nitrosoma and nitrospira. Well, that's nitrogen, right? That's 1/17 of all the microbes you need to account for, and that's not counting trace minerals, right? So so that's just nitrogen. So we're not talking about phosphorus, which I would highly recommend Mammoth P if you're doing anything in aquaponics, and then water soluble potassium, which Chris is going to talk about tomorrow and talked about on the show, and then so on and so forth. So this is where it really gets down the rabbit hole, and you can replace all the things that people go and spend money on in the store with these types of replacements. So this kind of is the future of where everything's kind of going in agriculture, not just in aquaponics, not just in living soil, but agriculture in general.
Water soluble potassium is just so badass because it's going to do away with sulfate of potash if you wanted to do organic hydroponics. So,
well, and then not only that, but look at the difference. Just to show you how much microbes make a difference, look at the difference between the minimum parts per million you need for aquaponics versus hydro. to get lettuce or tomato or cannabis crop, it's night and day different. Sometimes they're 5 times the levels in hydroponics, just because that microbe makes it that much more bioavailable. So that's really what's key, and where they're kind of missing the piece of the puzzle that they're always missing in hydro, and why hydro always has kind of missed the boat when it comes to flavor or potency or maybe not necessarily size, but certainly flavor and potency. It's never quite hit those same levels that soil does.
Possibly in cannabis, but I wouldn't agree necessarily with tomatoes. But yeah, with cannabis, I would say. I mean, I'm not going to argue there's great taste in
That's
tomatoes.
a separate discussion that I'll take it. But anyways, I was trying to wrap up the show. Chris Trump, did you have any other ways that people wanted to reach you before we let you go?
No, it's great, man. If you have some sort of formal inquiry, or you want to, you're looking at a project or something, you can email me at chris@naturalfarming.co. Yeah, Instagram, I get a lot of questions, people just wanting help. I try and answer all those, and Facebook too. But yeah, if you want something done comprehensively, it's a good way to get a hold of me. Email.
Awesome, appreciate it. And you can reach Mr. Green Jeans. You can check him out at mrgreenjeansgarden.com. And then you can find Marty at AP Meds on Patreon, YouTube, or I believe Gmail as well, and Instagram.
Cannabis Growers Group.
And the Aquaponic Cannabis Growers Group. Him and I both are over there as moderators. And then you can find me at Ponics, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, all the different places that you find and listen to podcasts, or on YouTube if you want the video format. And occasionally we upload the video format in other places when I have time. I'm thinking about just getting a Fiverr account and then hiring someone to do a lot of this kind of re-upload work, which for 15 extra bucks a month, I think that might cover a lot of the extra stuff we've been kind of missing lately while I've been traveling. So I'm all settled here. Expect a lot more live content, a lot more video content, a lot more IPM content, just a lot more content in general while I'm over here in Oklahoma. So we're going to be doing 5 acres of outdoor here shortly, along with putting up 2 more greenhouses. So we'll have a lot of really cool content, both aquaponic builds from scratch, as well as 5 acres of outdoor being done with living soil as organically as possible. So look forward to that. Thank everyone for watching. We work really hard for this. It's been a long week. This time of year is very taxing on everyone. Very long days for sure. So thanks a lot, and we'll catch you guys again next week.